Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Dark Sleep Radio. Here on this channel, I share real-life encounters with beings from beyond the skies to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. Before we dive in, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from now. Find a comfortable spot, relax, and let's begin. We were out near Comb Ridge in southern Utah, not at a proper campsite, but on a flat stretch of sandstone off a dirt road we'd wandered down. The four of us, Jenna, Trent, Dana, and me, had come together on a whim. Jenna knew the spot. Trent brought firewood, I had the tent, and Dana packed enough food to feed an entire search party. After a day of hiking and getting sunburned, we cracked open beers and watched the cliffs turn pink in the evening. We'd set up on a small plateau overlooking the Western Valley, cuffed with miles of mesas and dry scrub stretching out before us. One lonely road wound far in the distance, and no towns or houses broke the landscape. As the sun dipped, everything went still. The heat lingered, but no wind stirred. That eerie quiet settled in, the kind where you can hear the buzzing in your own ears. We stayed up past midnight, with no cell service to distract us. Around the campfire, we traded stories, laughing too hard at our own jokes. Dana tried to start an improv game from her acting class, but everyone was too tired or tipsy to play along. Eventually, the fire died down, and we lay back on our sleeping pads, staring up at the stars. They were everywhere, probably the clearest sky I'd ever seen. Jenna remarked how strange it was that the stars seemed closer out there, not brighter, but somehow nearer, like you could touch them if you stood on your toes long enough. Trent was talking about satellites, how they move in straight lines, slowly across the sky. We were only half listening, busy making up ridiculous names for constellations and laughing. Then Dana said something that changed everything. That one's moving fast. We all looked where she was pointing, a spot just above the northern rim of the plateau. At first, it looked like a regular star, maybe a bit brighter, but it was definitely getting lower. This wasn't like a meteor. No arcing, no flickering, no flaring out. Just a bright white dot dropping straight down, slow and smooth. "Is that a drone?" Jenna asked. But we knew it wasn't. No blinking lights, no discernible shape, just that silent, bright point falling through the sky. We were out camping, and everything was normal until that moment. The object hung in the sky above the cliffs, completely motionless. Not just slowing down, but frozen, like someone had hit pause on a video. No swaying, no movement. Just suspended there. The fire had burned out, and suddenly everything felt different. Colder, but not temperature-wise. The air seemed thinner, harder to breathe. Dana broke the silence, asking if anyone else heard something. I hadn't noticed until she mentioned it, a low humming, like bass vibrating through a wall. You couldn't hear it exactly, but you could feel it in your chest. It was faint, almost like a heartbeat, but somehow wrong. This light didn't move. We watched it for what felt like a full minute, just sitting in the sky. It wasn't mechanical, but it definitely wasn't natural either. Something about it was just off. Then it faded, not dimmed, not blinked at, but disappeared like someone was slowly turning down a dimmer switch. 1 second, a solid white point, the next, gone. We waited in silence. Trent finally asked if we should go, but go where? It was nearly 2 in the morning, miles from any main road. We didn't see anything else that night, but none of us slept. We lay in the tent, listening to the heavy silence. At dawn, something strange caught my eye. Our sleeping pads had been dragged about a foot east, and, not blown, not shifted, but deliberately dragged. You could see the scrape marks in the dust. Our packs were untouched, nothing missing. Dana suggested wind, but there hadn't been even the slightest breeze. The fire ring remained perfectly intact. Once we got close to cell service, Jenna checked her phone. No alerts, no seismic activity, nothing about test flights or weather balloons. We talked about it a few times after getting home, usually late at night with a drink in hand, but the conversation always seemed to trail off into uncertainty. The ridge where we camped that night haunts us all. We share the same memory. A star that dropped, hovered, and vanished like it was never there. None of us returned after that night. It was mid-March, just after 9 p.m. I was driving back to Rollins from my sister's place in Laramie. Wyoming nights have a unique emptiness that seeps into your mind. The landscape stretches wide and silent, making you feel small. I should have left earlier, but we lost track of time playing cards and talking about her kids. The drive is straightforward. I-80 West, long flat roads interrupted by patches of nothing. Street lights fade quickly once you're out of town. My usual road trip setup was in place. Coffee in the cup holder, a low podcast playing, and Frankie, my boxer mix, asleep in the back seat. She's mostly muscle and attitude, but road trips always knock her out. About 30 minutes in, somewhere between Arlington and Elk Mountain, the landscape is pure sagebrush with old wooden snow fences lining the highway. I glanced at the dash, 9:42 p.m., and noticed something strange about the light ahead. It wasn't headlights. A soft white glow hung above the road. Initially, I thought it might be a low-flying plane from the Medicine Bow airfield, but its movement was different. No flashing, no changing direction, just gliding. I slowed down to about 50 miles per hour, leaning forward to see better. The object was massive, black and almost invisible against the night sky, except when passing in front of a star. Triangle-shaped with rounded edges, no visible lights, but somehow the area beneath seemed slightly brighter. The silence was unnerving. No sound at all. No wind, no hum, no engine noise. It passed directly overhead, maybe 100 feet above the highway, possibly lower. I rolled down my window, hoping to hear something, but heard nothing. For about 15 seconds, I watched it drift over my Subaru's hood and move south, then disappear, like it had never existed. I pulled over onto the shoulder, flashers on, hands trembling with a strange mix of confusion and something else. The dash cam I'd bought after a semi rear-ended me last winter might hold some answers. It was a cheap front-facing camera that automatically records when the car starts, running on a loop and saving the last few hours unless you manually save a clip. The moment had happened so fast, something massive and completely silent, vanishing the second it was out of sight. Frankie, usually uninterested in anything but food, was now sitting up in the back seat, ears low, scanning the surroundings like she was searching for something that had disappeared. I fumbled with the small 2-inch screen, scrolling back to review the footage. Playing it through, I saw myself slowing down, looking up, and then nothing, just darkness. The road, a faint headlight glow, and then a black sky with no object, no triangle, not even stars. I replayed it slower, carefully examining each frame. Trees, snow fence, a slight windshield reflection, but the sky remained a clean, dark blank. Testing the camera, I recorded a fresh clip pointing out the windshield. Stars appeared clearly. Moon glare showed up. Passing trucks were visible. Everything worked perfectly, except for that missing triangle. Frankie remained alert during the drive home, sitting up arrayed, tea and watching the rear window as if something might suddenly appear. When we arrived, I backed into the driveway, sat for a moment in an unsettling silence, then went inside to feed her. Pulling the SD card, I checked the clip on my laptop. Full HD, time-stamped at 9:42 p.m., it showed me slowing down, leaning forward, rolling the window down. The wind sound was audible, but the sky, something was definitely wrong. Just blank, no object, no motion, not even the faint glow I saw passing overhead. It looks like I'm reacting to nothing. I checked other files on the card earlier, drive out my sister's neighborhood, even a coyote crossing the road around mile marker 267. All clear, but that one clip is the only one with the weird missing sky, almost like something scrubbed the image before it hit the card. I thought about posting the video online, but there's nothing to see. Just me acting strange and a missing patch of sky doesn't prove anything. A few days later, I drove the same route during the day, trying to match landmarks. I wanted to find the exact spot where it happened. At a rest area near Elk Mountain, I pulled off and checked mile markers, thinking maybe something physical would jog my memory, but I couldn't find the exact place. The fences all looked the same, the brush, the road. It's all just a repeating loop of the same landscape. That section of highway hasn't felt the same since. I still drive it sometimes, but only during the day. Frankie gets restless around Arlington now, starts shifting in her seat and pacing until we're well past it. Sometimes I wonder if other people saw something that night, but I didn't hear anything on the news. I even checked a few local forums, but nothing came up. No power outages, no sightings, no plane reports. Just a black triangle over the highway that didn't leave a trace behind, not even on the camera. the clip's still saved on my hard drive. Every now and then I open it just to make sure it's still the same. It always is. I was hiking in the Oida Mountains in Arkansas, early November, right after the first cold snap of the year. The trails were pretty empty. I'd taken a few days off work to get away from everything and clear my head. My plan was simple. 2 nights out solo, nothing too remote, but far enough off the beaten path that I wouldn't run into families or big groups. I brought my dog Jasper, a wiry little mutt I picked up from a shelter a few years back. He's quiet, good off leash, and usually more alert than I am. We parked at the trailhead just after lunch and set off. The sky was cloudy, and the air felt damp like it might rain later, but it held off most of the day. Just that dull, heavy kind of overcast that makes the woods feel closer than they are. By late afternoon, I'd made it about 5 miles. I set up camp in a familiar spot, a flat area above a creek nestled among thick pines and younger oaks. I got a small fire going and heated some canned chili while Jasper explored the surrounding brush. The first night was uneventful, though colder than expected. I woke up a couple times, burrowing deeper into my sleeping bag. Around midnight, I heard coyotes, nothing unusual for these woods. The next day continued without incident. We hiked a few more miles to a small ridge where I stopped for lunch, watching the tree line. Clouds had thinned slightly, but the day remained dim. Around 3 p.m., I decided to head back to our original campsite to keep things simple. About a mile from the site, navigating a narrow trail, Jasper suddenly froze. No growling or barking, just rigid, ears forward. I crouched beside him and listened. At first, only typical forest sounds, birds, rustling leaves. Then I heard it, a low, steady humming. Initially, I thought it might be a plane, but this sound was different, constant, mechanical, like an old generator running behind a wall. I looked up, expecting to see an aircraft or drone, but saw only clouds and trees. That's when I noticed something strange. Certain trees were moving. Not all of them, just those directly above us. They swayed in a slow, circular motion, each bending slightly at the top. There was no wind. The air was completely still. I even licked my finger and held it up to check. Nothing. Lower branches and undergrowth remained motionless. Jasper began whining softly, tail tucked low. When I tried to capture video on my phone, the humming abruptly stopped. The trees froze, as if paused. I stood there, phone in hand, waiting, but nothing more happened. Everything returned to normal. We continued moving, and I tried to rationalize the experience as some localized wind phenomenon or air pressure oddity. Yet the unsettling feeling persisted, a sense that we weren't meant to be standing there. As the sun began to set, I skipped building a fire and settled for a protein bar inside the tent. Jasper was right beside me, his nose pressed against the zipper flap, ears constantly twitching at every little noise. Sleep came eventually, but it was restless and interrupted. Around 3 a.m., Jasper started growling, a low, steady sound that wasn't quite a bark. Something had caught his attention. I carefully unzipped the tent and peered outside. There it was, a faint light moving through the trees. It was a soft blue-white glow, about the size of a basketball, floating roughly 6 feet off the ground. The light moved silently between the trees, almost like someone carrying a lantern without making a sound. What struck me most was how strange it looked. Despite touching the tree trunks, it didn't create any shadows. The brightness seemed to sit on top of everything without actually interacting with the environment. Neither Jasper nor I moved a muscle as the light drifted about 30 yards from our tent before disappearing behind a ridge. After that, sleep was impossible. We just waited, tense and alert. At first light, I packed up quickly. No breakfast, no boiling water. I just wanted to get moving. The forest seemed completely normal. Birds chirped, squirrels scampered across the trail, everything behaving as if nothing unusual had happened. About a mile from the trailhead, I heard the hum again. This time it was fainter, coming from somewhere off to the right, maybe behind a hill. I kept walking, head down, pushing forward until I reached my car. As we entered the gravel parking lot, the sound abruptly stopped, not fading, but cutting out like someone had unplugged it. I loaded Jasper into the back seat and drove, checking my rearview mirror constantly. I didn't stop until I hit the main road, 20 minutes later. I didn't share this story immediately. Not because I thought people would think I was crazy, but because I couldn't find the right words to explain it. I know the outdoors, and I know what's normal. This wasn't normal. It was the combination of things, the unexplained hum, the trees, the impossible light that made it so unsettling. Won't go near the tent after I tried setting it up in the yard a few weeks later to air it out. He just sat on the porch and stared like something was inside it. I haven't been back to the Awacha since. These days, I hike different trails closer to town, usually with friends. But even when I step into the woods for just an hour, I catch myself scanning the sky without meaning to, always looking for movement. So far, I haven't seen the trees move like that again, but I know what I saw. I'd recently gotten back into jogging after taking a few months off for a sprained ankle. Nothing dramatic, just stepped off a curb weird while walking my neighbor's dog. That night, my third run back, I was finally starting to hit my rhythm. It was a little past 9 p.m. in late August, still hot but not unbearable. The kind of sticky Missouri heat where the air feels heavy but cools just enough once the sun's been down a while. I ran the trail that loops around Millwood Park, a small one, nothing special. Just one paved path, some scattered benches, a duck pond, and a few swing sets with faded blue rubber flooring. It backs up against a residential neighborhood on one side and a small stretch of woods on the other. Pretty quiet most of the time. I like running that loop after dark because no one's ever really there. Just a couple dog walkers sometimes. Maybe some teenager vaping behind the gazebo. That night, I didn't even see anyone. I had my earbuds in at first, but took them out after the first lap, not sure why. Something about the stillness made me feel weird about not being able to hear what was going on around me. It wasn't like anything felt wrong exactly, just off. Little things started catching my attention as I rounded the bend near the tennis courts. First, I realized I hadn't seen a single car on the roads that bordered the park. Usually, you'll catch headlights going by every couple minutes, parents picking up their kids from practice, people driving home from late shifts. But the road was just empty. Then there was this weird rhythm to the sounds around me. The bugs were still going, cicadas, crickets, whatever else, but they were all in sync. Not just loud, but synchronized. It was like someone had looped an audio track of summer night noises and was playing it through a giant invisible speaker. No variation, no layers, just the same rise and fall over and over. I slowed down a little and glanced around. The park looked totally normal that night. Tall orange street lamps lined the trail, casting their usual glow. Near the basketball court, a metal trash can was full but not overflowing. The water fountain dripped steadily, but something felt off. The longer I looked, the less natural everything seemed. Shadows stretched weirdly. Nothing moved unless I moved. It was unsettling in a way I couldn't quite explain. I was finishing my second lap near the duck pond, heading toward the playground streetlights when things got strange. 3 lights, perfectly spaced about 30 feet apart, started flickering. First just a little, like a bulb going bad. Then all 3 began flickering in sync, buzzing, dimming, brightening, on and off with an almost deliberate rhythm. I stopped running and checked my phone. 9:13 p.m. Was this a power grid issue? We'd had a thunderstorm 2 nights earlier, but the timing felt too precise, too intentional. After about 20 seconds, the lights went completely dead. No buzzing, no glow, just black poles against the darkness. Then absolute silence fell. No bugs, no rustling leaves, no distant car sounds. It was like all sound had been sucked away. That's when I saw the light, small, blindingly white, hovering 30 or 40 feet above the treetops, about 100 yards away on the wooded side of the park. It didn't blink, didn't move, just hung there. Strangest of all, it cast no shadows. Despite being painfully bright, the trees beneath remained pitch black. I stood frozen, barely breathing. Arms pulled close, trying to make myself smaller. The light hung there for what felt like an eternity, maybe 30 seconds, maybe longer. Time felt distorted. Then it moved, not quickly, not slowly, just a smooth, horizontal glide across the treetops. A steady, unwavering line against the night sky. I first noticed something strange around 3:40 in the morning. My back had been bothering me, and I'd finally fallen asleep, but something, maybe a sound, woke me up. When I sat up, the house was silent. Lorna was still asleep. 2 weeks after that night in the park, I hadn't told anyone about what happened. Not my sister when she called. Not anyone. I didn't even go running for a while. But the morning after, something occurred that stuck with me. Around 6 a.m., I took Olive, my scruffy mutt with bad knees, for her usual walk. We usually stay close to home, just down the sidewalk and around the block. As we passed the park's north entrance, she stopped dead in her tracks, staring toward the trees. She wasn't sniffing or curious, just completely still. I waited, tugging slightly on her leash. She didn't move. Then, from deep in the trees, I heard a short, high-pitched click. It wasn't loud, but it didn't sound natural, more like a hard metal tap. Olive turned and walked back the way we came without me needing to pull her. I didn't argue. The night before had been unsettling. I was running through the park when something caught my eye. It was tracking along a rail, passing behind one of the bigger oaks before disappearing. I waited, counting the seconds. Nothing. When I stepped forward to get a better angle, my foot crunched on gravel, the only sound in what felt like an eternity. The noise echoed too loudly, like it didn't belong. Suddenly, from behind me, a flicker returned. I turned and saw 3 streetlights flashing, but not randomly. They were out of sync, wrong. One would flash twice, another would buzz, then all would go dark. In that moment, I got the sense that something was trying to mimic how lights behave, but not quite understanding, like it had watched from far away and was guessing. I started walking fast toward the trail exit near the rec center. The path curved, forcing me close to the woods again. I expected to see the light hovering above the trees, but it was gone. By the time I reached the sidewalk, everything seemed normal. Bugs were buzzing, faint traffic noises drifted in the distance, and the street lights looked fine. It's been almost 6 months now. I still run at night sometimes, but never at that park. The night was still, and Cedar, my old dog, hadn't stirred. Something felt off. Not fear, exactly, just a strange awareness that something wasn't right. Maybe the cows had bumped the fence again after the recent storms that had left the east pasture wire sagging. I dressed quickly and grabbed a flashlight. Outside, the temperature was unexpectedly cool for early May, with an eerie stillness that immediately struck me. No wind, no insects, no sounds of frogs or night birds, just the crunch of gravel under my boots and the creak of the screen door. Cedar didn't follow, which was unusual. He's an old cattle dog, mostly blind, but he always perks up when I move. That night, he stayed curled by the stove, something I'd only realize later. Heading down the slope behind the barn, my flashlight beam seemed shorter than normal, probably because of the patchy fog clinging low around the tree line. Everything felt flat, with no depth beyond 50 feet. Then I saw them. All 16 cows bunched tightly in the northwest corner of the pasture, pressed shoulder to shoulder like wet sheep, utterly silent. I whistled and called out, expecting some response. Nothing. Every single cow stared straight up, unmoving. These weren't skittish animals. They were used to coyotes and storms. But now they were dead still, eyes wide, breathing hard and rapid. Reflexively, I looked up. Nothing. Clear sky, stars, absolute silence. I scanned the fence line, checking for signs of intrusion. A dog, maybe a catamount, though we hadn't seen one in years. The wire was intact, no prints, nothing disturbed. I approached slowly, careful not to trigger a stampede. But these weren't normal cattle behaviors. Something was very wrong. I've been working with cattle since I was 20, and that night was unlike anything I'd experienced before. The cows were huddled together, staring skyward with an intensity that suggested they might bolt at any moment. But they didn't move. Halfway across the field, I switched off my flashlight. Something compelled me to do it, though I couldn't explain why. The darkness was different out here. Not like town darkness, but complete. That night, everything had a strange pale tint. Starlight made the sky bright, washing out the field into a dim, flat landscape. When I looked up again, the stars remained unchanged. But suddenly, a strange pressure settled in my chest. Not pain, exactly, but a weight as if something was pressing down from above. My knees buckled involuntarily, and the air felt different. Not warmer or colder, just heavier. I thought I might be hallucinating. To confirm I was awake, I slapped my own leg. The cows hadn't moved an inch. Merle, my big red Angus, who was usually the least skittish, had foam around his mouth and was shaking so badly he looked like he might collapse. Then, just as quickly as it came, the weight vanished, like someone had flipped a switch. My ears popped as if I'd descended from a high altitude. The cows turned simultaneously, not in panic, but methodically, as if someone had called them from behind. They drifted apart slowly, walking as if whatever had held them was now gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. Cedar, my dog, pressed against my leg like he used to when he was younger, continuously staring toward the pasture even after sunrise. Later that morning, I checked the area where the cows had been. The ground was dry with no burn marks, no circles, just slightly flattened grass where they'd stood. I called the vet that afternoon. They found nothing wrong, no disease, no stress markers. But the cows were different. They barely ate for a couple of days, just wandering quietly. I'd experienced strange things out here before. Distant lights, odd humming, always attributing them to weather or military tests from Dugway. But this was different. The way those cows looked, the way it felt, something was fundamentally off. Cedar wouldn't come outside until it was over. I haven't talked to anyone about it besides Lorna, and she thinks I just dreamed it, says I was probably sleepwalking again like I used to in my 30s. But I wasn't. I know I wasn't. The cows don't go near that corner anymore. They avoid it like it's fenced off. Nothing grows differently there, no dead patches, but they won't cross into it, not even when I put feed out. Last week, I caught Cedar standing at the window at 3:30 a.m., staring out across the yard. He doesn't see well anymore, but he stood there stiff as a board, just looking. When I walked over, he growled this low, unfamiliar rumble I hadn't heard from him in years. I looked out too. The sky was clear, full of stars, nothing moving, nothing there. As a surveyor for an environmental assessment company, I mostly do groundwork, but sometimes they send me up in a helicopter to get aerial footage when mapping large forest tracts or difficult terrain. I'm not a pilot, just a guy who knows how to operate drones and cameras and ride along. Last summer, I was out in northern Vermont near the New Hampshire border, flying over a dense forest covering hundreds of acres. Jared, the pilot, was a calm, steady type used to flying low and slow, so I could get clear shots. The day was mostly clear, with a slight haze, the kind of humidity that feels thick but invisible. The sun was dipping low, making the forest look like a giant, shadowy green blanket. We were on a routine flight. I had my handheld camera and a drone, recording the canopy and tree lines, trying to spot logging activity or clear cuts. I was scanning the live drone feed, flying it ahead of the helicopter to get tighter shots of certain areas. After about 45 minutes, Jared called out. I noticed something weird on the drone feed. A perfectly circular clearing in the middle of the thick forest, maybe 100 feet across, maybe a little more, with trees forming a perfect ring around it. What caught my attention was the gay, round inside, bare dirt, no grass or underbrush, almost like someone had scooped it out and left it clean. The circle was sharp-edged, as if drawn by hand. Empty ring of dirt sat in the middle of dense forest with no compass, fallen trees, machinery tracks, or any signs of disturbance. The clearing was eerily smooth and uniform. When Jared and I circled back to investigate, I focused the drone over the area, zooming in for detail. The ground looked oddly pristine. No erosion, tire tracks, or animal paths were visible. Faint patterns on the dirt suggested someone might have lightly raked it, though I couldn't be certain. What made this even stranger was that none of our maps or satellite images showed this location. We later checked the GPS coordinates back at the office, but nothing appeared where this clearing supposedly existed. The surrounding trees were supposed to be uninterrupted for miles. Jared joked about a secret helicopter landing zone or hunting camp, but the clearing was too perfect and clean. No fire rings, wood piles, or tire tracks indicated human presence. The ground seemed bare yet undisturbed in any typical way. I flew the drone lower, attempting to spot markings or footprints, but the resolution limited my view. The dense forest and lack of trails made a ground investigation impossible. As the sun slipped behind the trees, shadows lengthened inside the circular area. Something felt off about the surrounding trees. They stood tall and straight, but their bark appeared unnaturally smooth and almost reflective, like a thin gloss covered them. I initially thought it might be a camera glitch or sunlight effect, but the appearance remained consistent as the drone circled. Suddenly, the drone began to malfunction. The video feed cut in and out, with static crackling through the speaker. Jared suggested helicopter interference, but the glitches intensified whenever I focused on the clearing, creating an increasingly unsettling experience. The drone feed cut out, completely losing connection. Jared urged meta pullback, but something felt unresolved. I spent nearly 10 minutes trying to re-establish the link, when suddenly the feed flickered back, briefly revealing a faint blue glow centered in the clearing and another worldly light with no discernible source that vanished as quickly as it appeared back. At base, reviewing the drone footage revealed corrupted files, starting precisely at the light's emergence. The last clear frame showed nothing but an empty dirt circle and unsettling. Sensation lingered that something about that location was fundamentally wrong. Days later, I returned with my hiking buddy, Nate, who knows these woods intimately. We spent hours bushwhacking through dense undergrowth, searching for the clearing, but found nothing. The GPS coordinates seemed to mock us. Thick trees blocked every potential path. It brought along a metal detector and various tools, hopping to uncover some trace of evidence, yet discovered absolutely nothing. A eerie feeling of being watched persisted. Nate dismissed my unease with a laugh, but the kick of my neck told a different story. Periodically, the forest would fall into an unnatural silence. Even the wind ceased moving. It felt like the clearing possessed some strange presence that muted everything around it. As if prepared to abandon the search, something shifted between the trees, not running, just subtly moving it. Ride to focus, but whatever it was melted seamlessly back into the shadows before I could comprehend its forms. Since that day, I've avoided returning. The experience burned into my memory. The drone footage remains my only tangible proof of Perfy. CT circular area with an inexplicable blue light existing momentarily beyond conventional understanding. My colleagues remained silent, perhaps thinking a move or reacting, but now what I witnessed wasn't a landing site or campground. It was something else entirely, something that existed briefly in a space between known reality. Working the overnight shift at the downtown airport control tower, that cool April night, the city below glimmered like an illuminated grid while the airspace hummed with unexpected activity. For such late hours, I've been a radar controller for almost 5 years now, and I've seen my share of weird situations during countless shifts, tracking domestic flights and cargo planes. But nothing prepared me for what happened that night around 2:15 a.m. A blip appeared on the radar about 50 meters northeast of the airport, hovering at 30,000 feet. At first glance, it seemed routine. Planes cruise at that altitude all the time, but something felt off. I ran the call sign through multiple systems, cross-referencing with other controllers and flight tracking databases. Nothing matched. While unusual, this wasn't entirely unprecedented. Military aircraft sometimes use restricted codes, and private jets can fly without standard transponders. But this object wasn't moving. It just sat there, perfectly still at 30,000 feet. I radioed a nearby commercial jet from Boston, asking the pilots to look out their window. The captain's response was unsettling. He'd seen a faint light above them, but couldn't confirm anything definitive. Then it started climbing, slowly at first, just a few hundred feet per minute. But quickly, the vertical speed increased. The blip shot straight upward as if heading into space. I double-checked everything. The radar was functioning perfectly, and a secondary system at a neighboring tower confirmed the same bizarre trajectory. Watching it pass 35,000, then 40,000 feet, the object maintained a perfectly straight line. No wobbling, no course adjustments. Then suddenly, it vanished. No signals, no transponder code, just gone. I tried contacting regional centers, but no one else had seen anything similar. Later, reviewing the radar tape, I found nothing unusual. No echoes, no interference, no technical anomalies. That's the official account. But what happened afterward is what truly haunts me. After logging the event and filing the report, I stepped out onto the observation deck. The night was quiet, the city's distant hum steady and unchanged, as if nothing extraordinary had just occurred. The night was quiet after my shift at the tower, but something felt off. Earlier, a strange blip had vanished from the radar, leaving behind an odd bluish glow in the sky that lasted just seconds. Back inside, my radio scanner crackled with static, then a low humming emerged, a vibration I could feel deep in my chest. No one else seemed to notice. When I checked the radio, the hum stopped. I shrugged it off and finished my paperwork, preparing to clock out. Walking toward the break room, the lights flickered briefly. just enough to make me pause. Old buildings have their electrical quirks, but the timing felt strange. Through the tower windows, the city looked completely normal. Stepping outside again, hoping the weird energy would dissipate, I noticed a soft humming returning. A metallic scent hung in the air, like ozone, but with an unfamiliar undertone. I didn't want to linger, so I left and drove home. Days later, my FAA buddy mentioned some chatter about a ghost target in the system, but nothing was confirmed. The radar logs were inconclusive, and no official reports surfaced about strange lights or aircraft. Months later, I was sitting with my 6-year-old daughter June on our porch steps outside Flagstaff. It was late spring, just after dusk, with that crisp desert sky that comes when the heat fades. We were stargazing, no fancy telescope, just blankets and our shared wonder. June, curious as always, pointed upward. "Daddy, that star's getting closer," she whispered, as if sharing a secret. I followed her gaze, expecting a plane or satellite. Something was different. It was just one bright star, unnervingly still. I kept thinking about that moment in the tower, the blip climbing straight up, the unexplained humming. Whatever I'd seen wasn't like any aircraft I'd ever tracked. Something remained unexplained, lingering just beyond understanding. The night was quiet at Cedar Ridge Observatory, high up in the Cascades. I was on my usual shift, monitoring telescopes and data streams, when something caught my eye. It started small, just a tiny light among other stars. But over the next 20 minutes, that light began to change. At first, I thought it might be a trick of the atmosphere, like how airplane lights can look strange when they're low. But June, sitting beside me, was watching intently. Her eyes were wide, and she whispered, "It's getting bigger." I tried to stay calm for her sake. "Maybe it's just a helicopter or a plane," I said, but even I didn't believe my own words. There were no flashing lights, no engine sounds. The light wasn't moving across the sky like aircraft typically do. Instead, it seemed to be descending, getting closer, while staying in exactly the same spot. June gripped my hand, her little fingers trembling. "Look, Daddy, it's right there now," she whispered. I wanted to reassure her, to say it was nothing, but I was becoming uneasy too. The light was incredibly bright, far brighter than any star or satellite I'd ever seen, and still no sound. Then, as suddenly as it had grown, the light vanished, just disappeared like someone had flipped a switch. June looked up at me, confused. "Where did it go?" she asked. I had no answer. That night, sleep was impossible. I kept looking outside, hoping to make sense of what we'd seen. The sky was empty, quiet, as if nothing had happened. I tried to rationalize it, a burning satellite, maybe a flare, but nothing explained what we'd witnessed. What stuck with me was how real it felt. Not a trick of imagination, but something tangible. June had seen it too, just as clearly as I had. I've replayed that moment countless times, trying to understand that strange experience of watching something approach from impossibly far away, then simply disappear into nothing. The observatory sits on airage miles from the nearest town, surrounded by nothing but trees and sky. The night's out. There are real ways dark, letting you see every star when the sky is clear. This particular spring night was unusual, crystal clear with no clouds or haze, and the astronomers were excited about some specific observations. My job was keeping everything running smoothly, while their researchers slept mostly paperwork and occasional troubleshooting, perfect for someone who enjoys quiet and avoids crowds. We had 4 telescopes online that night, each pointed at different parts of the sky. It was monitoring logs, running diagnostics, and taking notes around 1:15 a.m. Something strange happened. Telescope 3's signal suddenly dropped without warning, no error messages. The monitor went completely blank, like the feed was Kitride resetting and reconnecting, but nothing worked. The connection was simply gone. What really unnerved me was the last image capture for the blackout, a blurry shifting shape covering nearly half the field of view. Blotting out stars, the blur looked as if something moved incredibly fast in front of the lens. This made no sense. The telescope was housed in a locked dome, and the security alarm hadn't made a sound to check the security footage for the previous 2 hours. Noon approached the building, now unusual shadows, no animals near the equipment, just the usual raccoons scurrying by hours earlier. It called Danny, coworker, who lives in a cabin on the property. She hadn't noticed anything. Odd, the place was eerily quiet. A chill ran up my spine despite the warm room. The power flickered briefly, making all monitors blink off, and on only the observatory's equipment seemed affected. I stepped outside for fresh air. The night was so still it felt like the forest was holding its breath. Looking up, the stars were bright and endless, but one patch above the ridge seemed slightly dimmer, like a faint shadow crossing overhead sky. The night was quiet until something caught my eye and vanished just as quickly. Jasper, my border collie mix, stirred in his kennel, growling softly, unusual for him after dark. Something felt off. I walked down the path to check the power box. Everything looked normal. No blown fuses, no strange readings. The blinking had stopped. Back inside, I tried reconnecting to Telescope 3, but the feed remained dead. Then my phone buzzed. An unknown number. One word, look. Outside, the forest stood still. Jasper watched me intently, silent now. I didn't reply. The TV offered no distraction. No news or weather report hinted at anything unusual. At 3 a.m., a soft mechanical hum emerged from Telescope 3's dome. Steady, constant. Flashlight in hand, I headed out with Jasper close behind. The dome was locked tight, no sign of entry. The hum stopped as I approached. One last check of the camera feed revealed something strange. A blurry shape that wasn't random motion. Elongated, like a shadow moving just beyond focus. I spent the night watching. Half sky, half screens. No more blurs, no more lost signals. But a feeling lingered, as if something had brushed against the edge of known reality. Dawn brought me home through empty mountain roads. Jasper remained quiet. The next day, the observatory replaced the telescope's camera, but they never discovered the cause of the blackout. I still don't know about the blur, the flickering power, or the mysterious text. But now, when I look up at the stars, a part of me wonders what might exist just beyond sight. Earlier that day, I'd been battling city traffic, desperate to escape into the countryside before nightfall. Route 39 stretched endlessly, nothing but dense woods and occasional abandoned farmhouses. Exhausted, I decided to rest. A small turnout appeared, just big enough for a car. I pulled in, killed the headlights, and paused. I left the engine running to keep the heater going. Mid-October, it was cold enough to need warmth, but not quite freezing. The sky hung overcast, a dull gray that sucked the color from everything, perfect for a nap. I reclined the driver's seat and closed my eyes, trying to clear my mind. When I woke up, the engine was still humming. The dashboard clock read 9:42 p.m., but I had no memory of falling asleep. One moment I was thinking about pulling over. The next, it was pitch dark and much later than expected. It felt like time had simply jumped ahead. I checked my phone immediately. The lock screen matched the dashboard clock, which seemed normal. But when I opened the call history, something was off. Completely blank. I distinctly remembered phone calls earlier that day, talking to my sister, leaving a voicemail for my boss, confirming a mechanic appointment. All those calls should have been there, but they weren't. Looking out the window, the woods were thick and silent. No streetlights, no other cars, just the faint outline of trees against the dark sky. I restarted the phone, but the call history remained empty. My GPS app was frozen, unable to get a satellite signal. Strange, since this stretch of Route 39 typically had good coverage. The dashboard clock matched my phone's time, but I couldn't remember what time it was before pulling over. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was more exhausted than I thought. Perhaps I'd slept for a few hours, and the phone had glitched. I stepped out into the cold night air, stretching to shake off the stiffness. Something felt different about the forest, not just quiet, but almost expectant. I walked around the turn, out, and looked back at the road. Not a single car had passed the entire time I'd been there. I tried calling my sister and my friend Carlos, but the calls wouldn't connect. No service. Another red flag. I'd been on the phone just hours ago, so how could I have lost signal so suddenly in the middle of nowhere? Unease settled over me. I went back to the car and turned off the engine, planning to head to the small diner a mile down the road. But when I reached to turn the key, something felt off. The engine sputtered but stayed on, like it was stuck halfway between on and off. The key was still in the ignition, and a faint static played on the radio. I took the key out and put it back in, but the engine never fully shut down. A weird buzzing feeling filled my chest, as if the car was humming in an unnatural way. I locked the doors and sat back, trying to calm down. Then I noticed something in the rearview mirror. A faint glow appeared behind the car, just beyond the turnout's edge. I swung the door open and stepped out, the cold hitting me like a wall. I didn't want to look, but I had to know. This wasn't from headlights or a flashlight. It was low to the ground, almost like a soft, pulsing lantern, but in a pale blue color that didn't seem natural. I scanned the tree line. Nothing. No headlights, no figures. I stared a little longer, and then it blinked out, just like that. My heart raced as I got back in the car and locked the doors again. Silence, thick and heavy. No radio static, no engine noise. The car's dashboard was completely dead. When I pulled out my phone, the screen was back to normal. Call history restored, as if nothing had ever changed. My GPS worked too. It was 11:43 p.m., 2 hours later than before. I called my sister. This time it connected. I told her what happened, but she sounded half asleep and didn't know what to make of it. Driving back, the road was empty. Woods on either side, just trees. Nothing strange. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that blue glow again. It never came. Back home, I checked the car and phone thoroughly. Everything worked fine, but I can't shake the feeling that something happened during those missing 2 hours. Something that shouldn't have. The running engine, the vanishing and reappearing call log. Something was off. The night was calm and quiet when Jamie and I were out sailing off the Maine coast. We'd been on the water for a few hours, anchored near a spot where the ocean floor drops sharply, the kind of place that usually promises interesting marine life. Jamie had brought her underwater camera, hoping to capture something special. I was at the helm, enjoying the peaceful evening when she called me over with a tense voice. When I looked where she was pointing, something strange was moving beneath our boat. At first, I thought it might be a whale or a large school of fish, but something felt off. Its movement was too slow, too deliberate. The shape was unlike anything I'd seen before. Massive, bigger than a humpback, with perfectly smooth and rounded edges. It wasn't like a normal marine creature. Instead, it looked like a huge, solid jellyfish emitting an unnatural pale blue light that pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. We stared in silence, the only sounds being water against the boat's hull and a distant loon's call. The shape moved beneath us, keeping pace for a few minutes before disappearing into the darkness. I tried scanning the water with my flashlight, but the beam couldn't penetrate the blackness. Jamie attempted to photograph it, but the camera could only capture blurry shadows. Every frame showed something shifting and moving, alive yet completely alien. We sat watching and waiting, but the mysterious shape never returned. That weird blue light wasn't a light at all, and I'd driven that route many times before. Nothing jaw like this had ever happened. The night on the water had been strange from the start. My colleague Jamie and I were out late, and something felt off. While I was checking the deck lights, I noticed the sky was completely black. No stars, just faint clouds rolling in from the horizon. Jamie joined me and commented that she didn't remember clouds being there earlier. When I glanced at my watch, something odd caught my attention. Just 20 minutes before, the time seemed normal, but now it read 110 a.m. Jamie agreed that it felt like barely 45 minutes had passed since our initial observation. We dismissed the weird time discrepancy, attributing it to exhaustion from being out on the water so late. The next morning's radio reports added another layer of mystery. Boats miles away were describing strange lights, a slow-moving, glowing shape beneath the water's surface. Neither local fishermen nor the Coast Guard could offer an explanation, and no radar or sonar had detected anything unusual. I couldn't stop thinking about that shape, its calm, deliberate movement, and the rhythmic pulsing light beneath the waves. It wasn't like any animal or machine I'd encountered. Though we made it back safely, the ocean felt different that night, bigger, more mysterious. Something was watching us from just beyond sight. As a wildlife biologist working in a remote part of the Appalachians, I'm used to unusual experiences. Last fall, while tracking black bear movements, I was installing trail cameras in an area deep in the woods, about a mile from the nearest road. The site was dense with trees, their canopies thick and imposing. I set up the camera on a sturdy oak about 5 feet off the ground, just before dusk. The weather was calm and cool, with a slight breeze. One of those moments where the light transitions from golden to twilight, creating an eerily still atmosphere. I configured the camera to take photos every 5 minutes and capture motion-triggered video. hoping to document some nocturnal animal activity. 2 weeks later, I hiked back to retrieve the camera. The walk was silent, except for occasional twig snaps underfoot. Even though I saw nothing specific, I felt on edge. Being alone in those woods always heightens my senses. When I reached the camera, it was undamaged, and I carefully removed the SD card before heading back to my cabin. That night, I plugged the card into my laptop, eager to review the footage. I'd been tracking wildlife through the forest for weeks, capturing routine footage of swaying leaves and occasional wildlife. Nothing out of the ordinary. But then around 3:17 a.m., a single still photo changed everything. The lighting was surreal. Where there should have been darkness, the entire scene was illuminated as if someone had flipped on a massive spotlight. Every detail stood out with impossible clarity. Trees, underbrush, ground, all visible in a brightness that defied nighttime conditions. No moonlight, no artificial sources, no storm that could explain it. I checked other images from the same period. They showed typical nighttime darkness, dim outlines barely discernible. Only this single frame was different, blazing like midday. Initially, I suspected a technical glitch, maybe a camera sensor malfunction or software error. But cross-referencing with other cameras in the area revealed nothing similar. No one else had reported anything unusual. The next day, I returned to the site with a light meter. My goal was to understand the impossible brightness. The readings confirmed total darkness. No streetlights, no nearby cabins, nothing that could generate such illumination. 10 days of subsequent footage revealed nothing out of the ordinary. But when I retrieved the camera, something else caught my attention. The ground beneath looked subtly disturbed. A patch of moss and leaf litter with an odd scraping, not animal tracks, more like something had lightly brushed the surface. I showed the photos to my colleague Mara, known for her practical skepticism. Maybe a hunter or camper, she suggested, but the perfectly circular disturbance seemed strange. We agreed to investigate together the following weekend. When we arrived, an unnatural stillness hung in the forest. No birds, no insects, no background hum of life. Just silence. Something was different. Something was watching. The summer before junior year was hot and dry, with barely a breeze at night. I was 16 and living in Claremont, a small town nestled between farmland and hills that locals like to call mountains. One night, I snuck out to meet Cassie and Trenton behind the gas station on Pine. We weren't up to anything wild, just sitting around talking, occasionally passing a stolen vape, and killing time away from home. Later, we walked around the camera site, scanning the area. Mara pointed out something odd about the nearby trees. Their bark had a faint, almost polished sheen, subtle but unmistakable once you noticed it. We collected bark and soil samples, trying to find some explanation. Back at the cabin that night, I studied the strange daylight photo again. Zooming in, I spotted a barely visible shape in the background behind the trees. Tall, thin, and standing completely still, too tall to be a deer or human. The figure was shadowed and hard to make out, unlike any animal I recognized. When I showed the image to Mara, she shrugged, saying it could be a trick of light or a double exposure. But her usual confidence was missing. I asked around locally, but no one else had seen anything similar. No reports of weird lights or strange figures emerged. Over the next few weeks, I kept checking the cameras remotely. One night, while reviewing footage at the cabin, the power flickered briefly. When it came back on, the laptop's timestamp had jumped ahead by nearly an hour, and the camera files were mysteriously corrupted. That creeping feeling returned, like I was missing something important. I kept the camera running for another week, but the forest remained silent and dark. When I finally took down the camera for good, I left it on my desk. Late at night, I still find myself staring at that bright photo. The trees look unnaturally clear and still, with a shadowy figure barely visible behind the trunks. I don't know what was out there that night, but I'm certain it wasn't just a trick of light or a sensor error. The woods kept their secret. My curfew was 11, but my parents didn't check on me unless I gave them a reason. I had hung out longer than usual with Cassie, and when I looked at her phone, it was 12:11 a.m. Still, I knew I should head back before pushing my luck. The walk home stretched across a couple of neighborhoods that looked eerily identical. dim yellow streetlights, uniform mailboxes, and sidewalks with cracks in the same spots. Trenton offered to walk with me halfway, but I declined. I actually enjoyed walking alone at night. It was one of the only times the town felt spacious. No cars, no barking dogs, just the occasional porch light left on. The sky was clear, close to a full moon, with stars visible. My phone battery was low, so I tucked it in my pocket and walked in silence, cutting through familiar back lots and alleys. About 3 blocks from home, near the curved section of Elm with its row of duplexes and empty lots, everything was incredibly quiet. I heard the faint hum of a utility pole transformer and the soft clink of my shoelace against my sneaker. That's when I saw it. A figure standing on the roof of a duplex. Not crouching, not moving, just standing perfectly still on the roof's ridge, as if it had just stepped up and frozen in place. I stopped walking. The nearby streetlight flickered briefly. That quick die, bright shift they sometimes do. When I looked up again, the figure was gone, not climbing down or moving, simply not there anymore. I stood staring at the roof for maybe 30 seconds. I even stepped into the road, trying to get a clearer angle, thinking maybe it had shifted to a spot I couldn't see. Nothing. I pulled out my phone to check the time, wondering if I'd zoned out. It read 1:23 a.m. I stared, pressed the side button, and checked again. Still 1:23. I didn't panic immediately. I considered that maybe Cassie's phone was wrong earlier, or I'd misread the time. But something didn't feel right. I was good with numbers and knew I'd seen 12:11 before leaving. The walk should have taken 20 minutes at most, not over an hour. I walked the rest of the way home without looking back. Every sound felt different. The first few blocks were clear in my memory. The corner store with its busted freezer, the alley behind Miss Harville's place with weird graffiti. But after that, everything went hazy. Not missing exactly, just flat like a dream you're not sure you actually had. That night, the sounds felt strange. The buzz of lights, the rustle of leaves, even my own breathing seemed to bounce back from somewhere it shouldn't. I got home through the garage, parents asleep, Dad's late-night fishing show still flickering on the TV. Upstairs in the bathroom, the clock matched my phone. 1:27. I sat on my bed's edge, trying to piece together the walk. I didn't sleep, just laid down, keeping my eyes open until morning light. Later, I asked Cassie about the time. Right after midnight, she said, around 12:10. Trenton showed me a text he'd sent at 12:14 that never delivered because my phone was on Do Not Disturb. The timestamps lined up. I didn't tell them what I'd seen, didn't want to sound crazy. That afternoon, I returned to Elm Street. Broad daylight, cars passing, neighbors mowing lawns. I studied the duplex roof, nothing unusual. No ladder, no obvious way up. It wasn't high, but not something you could casually climb. No security cameras. The yard empty. A faint ticking caught my attention, coming from a power box. Not mechanical, more like a sharp, static-like click, click, click. I moved closer, thinking it might be old wiring, but the sound stopped when I approached. Backing up, it started again. Forward, silence, back, click, click, click. I left and haven't returned to that block since. Nothing like that ever happened again. But I changed my phone's lock screen to show large time numbers, just in case. I still check every time I walk alone. It was late March. We were at the cabin. Night still cold, snow lingering in the ridge's shaded parts, but the sky clear. Clear skies and dry roads set the perfect stage for our trip. We'd been wanting to visit our mountain cabin, tucked away from everything. Jeanette loves coming early in the season, before tourists start wandering around. We built this place back in '91. It's simple, a single-story cabin with a covered porch, a small wood stove, and solar lights. No TV, no internet, just books, a deck of cards, and Jeanette's jigsaw puzzles. I handle the cooking. We're both 70 now and retired. That Monday evening around 8:45, after finishing lentil soup and cornbread, I stepped outside with hot cider. My routine is to listen for owls. The mountain sounds are familiar. Wind through trees, occasional coyote calls. But that night was different. Completely still. No breeze, no bugs. The moon hadn't risen, but stars blazed brightly. Leaning against the railing, I scanned the sky as I always do. The view stretches across the next ridge, miles of tree line. That's when I spotted them. 3 pale yellow lights, moving west to east just above the mountain line. They formed a loose triangle, maintaining a steady shape and pace. No sound, no erratic movement. I initially thought they MiG, HTB planes, but something was off. No strobes, no blinking, no color changes. They weren't following any flight path I recognized. We sometimes see commercial airliners heading toward Denver, but those you hear long before seeing. These were silent. I called Jeanette out. She grabbed her fleece and joined me. The lights were still visible, continuing their smooth trajectory until disappearing behind the eastern ridge. Maybe 4 or 5 minutes total. She asked if I'd seen anything like this before. I hadn't. We waited another 10 minutes. Nothing else happened, so we went inside. That should have been the end of it. Around 1:30 a.m., something woke me. Not a sound or crash, just a sense that something had changed. The cabin was utterly silent. Jeanette slept beside me. I pulled on my boots and opened the front door. Cold porch. My breath fogged in the night air. My eyes adjusted, and there they were again. 3 lights, same shape, but this time lower, hovering just above the tree line across the narrow valley. I knew those trees well, could hike there in about 40 minutes. They hung motionless, not swaying, and I watched for what seemed like 10 minutes or more. Then one light began to dim, not flickering, but fading slowly over 30 seconds until it vanished completely. The other 2 remained stationary. Jeanette appeared beside me in her robe, having noticed my absence from bed. Together we stood in the cold, observing the 2 remaining lights. Soon, the second light dimmed identically to the first, leaving only one. It lingered, seemingly forever. The cold crept into my fingers, but I couldn't bring myself to go inside. Then something changed. The final light blinked, a gradual, pulsing fade in and out. Suddenly, it slid about 50 feet to the right and stopped. Another slow blink followed, and within seconds, it too disappeared. We waited another 20 minutes, just in case, but nothing more happened. The next morning, I checked the snow-covered ridges with my binoculars. No tracks, nothing disturbed. We barely discussed it, sharing coffee and doing the crossword as usual. That afternoon, I hiked the narrow game trail to where I thought the lights had been. No signs remained, no burn marks, no flattened brush. We stayed the rest of the week, and though the lights never reappeared, each night before bed, we'd step onto the porch and look out, the forest feeling unnaturally silent. I flew drones on the side, real estate, weddings, events, picking up extra work on top of my printing shop job. It was October, with leaves just starting to turn and the air finally cooling down. I had a shoot scheduled for Vic, a landscaping business owner wanting promo footage of a recently completed property with its clean lines, trimmed hedges, and integrated lighting. The suburban neighborhood spread out behind the golf course, quiet and still. I was doing a drone shoot, scheduled for just after sunset, when the yard lighting would really shine. After arriving a bit past 8, I talked through the angles with the homeowner, did a quick walkthrough, and set up in the cul-de-sac. My gear was simple: the drone case, controller, and a small folding chair. Everything felt routine as I launched around 8:35. The sky had darkened, but a hint of ambient light remained. I sent the drone up to 60 feet and began a slow orbit of the property, watching the live feed on my tablet. The Skidio signal was rock solid, and the 4K camera moved smoothly. About 15 minutes in, something caught my eye. A flicker in the lower corner of the feed, not a technical glitch, but something moving just beyond the frame. I initially dismissed it as a bird or passing animal. But as the drone swept over the backyard, a strange shape appeared at the video's edge. It was a darker blur against the night sky, almost like a patch that didn't reflect light normally. When I looked up, nothing was there, just stars and open sky. I stopped the drone mid-flight and hovered. On the screen, part of the shape remained visible. I adjusted the camera, panning slowly. The thing didn't move, but seemed to track just outside the frame's edge. This is when things got weird. Panning the camera right, the shape moved with it. I couldn't see anything with my own eyes, but the video feed showed a faint outline. It looked like heat distortion, almost mirrored, following the drone's rotation. I tried climbing higher, thinking it might be a ground reflection, but at 90 feet, the anomaly persisted. At 120 feet, the drone crept closer, but not in real life. On my screen, a shape lingered, barely visible, almost hidden. Darkness surrounded me, a low drone buzz humming overhead. something felt off. I killed the drone's lights, watching the feed. The image grew grainier, but the shape became more defined. Oval, smooth, with a matte quality that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No sound, no wind, no movement. When I tapped the screen to focus, the autofocus pulsed weirdly, then stuttered and failed, something that had never happened before. Suddenly, the feed blinked to black, then returned. I froze. The drone's telemetry showed everything normal. Battery at 72%, no errors. I started easing the drone backward. The shape didn't move immediately, then began sliding sideways, matching my speed perfectly. 5 minutes into this strange encounter, I noticed my controller feeling warm. Not hot, just noticeably warm, which never happens. No moving parts, no overclocking. The tablet's back felt warm too. Then came a sound, not from above, but through my Bluetooth earbud. A clicking noise. Rapid, quiet, irregular, like someone gently tapping a fingernail against a mic. Sometimes fast, then a pause, then slower, almost like an unstructured Morse code. I pulled the earbud out. The sound stopped, plugged it back in. Silence. Looking at the screen again, the shape had vanished. I spun the drone in a full 360. Nothing but backyard, roof lines, and distant porch lights. Switching the LED back on, I dropped to 60 feet and circled the property. Still nothing. I kept recording for another 10 minutes, hands shaking slightly. I didn't want to spook whatever had been there. I worked nights at an old airfield on the outskirts of Cedar Creek, Montana. It's mostly abandoned now, with just a few small planes coming through, private pilots and crop dusters during summer. The rest is just empty runways, cracked pavement, and rusting hangars. My job is to watch over the place and make sure no one sneaks around after hours. My shift runs from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and I'm usually alone except for my German Shepherd Juno. She's my companion and always alert, and hates the cold as much as I do. Early October nights here get cold fast, and the airfield feels especially empty and exposed, the kind of place where your own footsteps sound strange. One foggy morning around 5:30 a.m., I was doing my usual checks. The mist stuck close to the ground, swallowing up the runway lights. You couldn't see much past the runway's end, and the place felt more isolated than ever. I was in the control tower, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching the security monitors. After a previous drone job for a client named Vic, something weird had happened. I'd landed the drone in his driveway and packed up quickly. He thanked me and asked if I got good footage. I said I'd send the files later and didn't mention anything else. Back home, I transferred everything to my desktop. The footage was all there, including the strange part. When I scrubbed through slowly, I could see something on the live feed, but the recorded footage showed nothing. No shape, no distortion, no tracking. Just smooth aerial footage of a backyard at night. I checked the raw data. Everything seemed normal, bitrate consistent, file size matched what I shot, no dropouts or corrupted frames. The only odd thing was a 3-second gap in the flight log from 84912 to 84915. The drone's location didn't update. No elevation change, no coordinates. Then it resumed as if nothing happened. The Skyo typically logs every second without fail. I didn't report anything, unsure who I'd even tell. I still use the drone and still do gigs, but now I don't fly at night unless someone's with me, and I don't wear the earpiece anymore. The abandoned airfield was quiet, with only empty asphalt and dead grass stretching out before me. From my position in the tower, I was monitoring the longest runway through a camera mounted about 20 feet high, providing a wide view of the concrete below. Just as I was about to check my watch, something caught my eye on the screen. A faint shape sat halfway down the runway, barely visible. I blinked and leaned closer, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The shape was dark, almost like a shadow, but too round and smooth to be a car or piece of trash. It didn't resemble any plane I'd seen at this location. Zooming in to full screen, I confirmed the object was still there. No lights, no movement, just a dark silhouette against the cold runway. A chill ran through me, despite the warm room. Juno, my dog sitting by my feet, suddenly stiffened and let out a soft growl, unusual for her, as she's typically calm during my shifts. Grabbing my flashlight and coat, I decided to investigate in person. Outside, thick fog enveloped me, carrying the damp smell of earth and old fuel. Juno followed closely, her tail down but ears alert. As I approached the runway, the shape seemed to grow larger in the distance. I tried rationalizing it, maybe old equipment or a weather balloon, but when the fog thinned slightly, I realized this was something entirely different. Low to the ground and about the size of a small van, its surface was a matte black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. No markings, no lights, nothing made sense. Stopping about 30 feet away, I shined my flashlight at the object. The beam behaved strangely, almost as if swallowed by the shape. Juno remained close but stopped growling, simply staring. When I tried to take a picture with my phone, the screen went black. No signal, no power. As I took a step back, the object vanished. No sound, no flash, just gone. Blinking and scanning the runway, I found only cracked concrete and drifting fog. My heart raced as I stood there, trying to process what had just happened. I attempted to call dispatch, but the radio was dead too. I reported that I'd keep monitoring the situation and returned to the tower, the mysterious encounter leaving me unsettled and questioning everything I thought I knew. I'd been working as a courier in northern Vermont for about a year, driving winding country roads through forests and fields beyond the last few towns. Late shifts meant long stretches of solitude, and I knew the routes well enough to navigate without GPS, though I still kept the app running. One cool, clear evening, just after sunset in late October, something strange happened. During my shift, I noticed an odd occurrence with the camera footage from the runway. From exactly 5:32 a.m. to 5:33 a.m., the video was completely corrupted, just static and glitching pixels, as if a chunk of the file had vanished. Every other camera's footage was perfectly fine, but this one had a suspiciously perfect, uninterrupted glitch. When I downloaded the clip, thinking it might be a technical error, the corruption didn't look random. It seemed deliberately scrambled. I ran the file through recovery software, but the program could only produce scrambled, distorted frames. No recognizable shapes or movement appeared, just weird pixel patterns. My supervisor dissed me, said it casually, suggesting it was likely old equipment, a faulty cable, or interference. But something felt off. The next day, I checked the runway area in daylight and found nothing unusual. No tire tracks, no footprints, no signs anything had been there. My dog Juno refused to go near that part of the runway, growling low whenever I tried to get her closer. I kept reviewing the footage after work, hoping for a hint, but that 1-minute glitch remained exact, consistent, and frustratingly blank. Weeks passed with no similar incidents, no strange lights, no odd shapes, no signal problems. Sometimes when fog rolls in thick at night, I swear I see a dark shape far down the runway, just at the edge of visibility. I always check the cameras, but that glitchy gap remains, and Juno still won't approach that section of the airfield. I can't explain what I saw or why the footage was corrupted at that precise moment. But occasionally, I think about that silent, dark shape sitting in the fog, seeming to disappear like it was never meant to be captured on camera. I was on a delivery route that wound through remote, dense forest areas where trees crowd the roadside and darkness seems to swallow everything. It was around 8:45 p.m., and my Beagle Mix Scout was dozing in his crate as I navigated a narrow dirt road threading between pine and maple trees. Suddenly, my GPS started acting strange. The signal dropped completely, with my truck's location frozen on the screen. I pulled over, trying to troubleshoot, turning the app off and on, rebooting the phone, but nothing worked. 2 weak cellular bars showed I had some connection, so I figured the dense trees might be blocking the satellite signal. The phone's clock kept running normally, but the GPS remained stuck. Everything seemed quiet, typical of a forest night. Scout stirred, giving a soft whine that caught my attention. When I tried calling dispatch, the call wouldn't connect, no ring, no voicemail, as if I were completely out of service. As minutes passed, something felt increasingly wrong. The trees outside weren't moving past my truck like they should. It was like the world outside had become completely static. I stopped, stepped out, and listened. No sounds, no birds, no insects, no wind. Just an unsettling silence that made my skin crawl. Scout growled softly in his crate. Without warning, the GPS signal suddenly returned. The screen jumped forward, showing I was miles past my next delivery point. Confused, I looked out the windshield. The road ahead looked unfamiliar, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something bizarre had just happened during those lost minutes. There was something off about that stretch of road, a feeling I couldn't shake. 20 minutes had vanished without a trace, and I had no memory of driving those miles. No recollection of curves, no sound of tires on gravel, no glimpse of trees or signs. Scout sat quietly beside me, his big eyes watching, sensing something wasn't right. I shook my head, trying to focus on the deliveries. When I called dispatch, the call went through this time. The dispatcher reported nothing unusual. At the next stop, a small cabin tucked back in the woods. The porch light was on, but no one answered my knock. The GPS worked fine on the way back, but an unsettling feeling lingered. No other drivers passed me, no animals crossed the road, and the silence was unlike anything I'd experienced before or since. Those 20 minutes remained a complete blank. The next day, I double-checked my phone. No errors, no crashes. I tried to piece together what happened, but kept hitting a wall. Sometimes I wonder if I was even driving during that time, or if I was just sitting still somewhere else. Late summer evening, I was on the back porch after dinner. Luna, my border collie mix with a burnt sugar-colored coat, lay stretched at my feet. The sky was mostly clear, a few low clouds hanging around, the air warm but not sticky. My backyard, about an acre, opens into woods at the edge of a small Vermont town. Luna usually spends evenings chasing shadows or nosing through bushes. That night, I was half scrolling on my phone, half zoning out as the last light faded. Something caught my attention. The animals were acting strange. The squirrels stopped scrambling, freezing with twitching noses. Rabbits behind the shed sat motionless, ears pointed straight up. Even the usually darting chipmunks were stock still, staring. Luna sat up, ears perked, eyes fixed. The whole thing still puzzles me. I noticed something was off with the wildlife. The deer I usually see grazing near the tree line at this time of day stood completely still, their heads lifted, muscles tense, eyes locked upward. Every animal around me was frozen, staring at the sky. A strange unease crept over me. I figured it might be a predator they were sensing, but something felt different. The silence was eerie. No rustling bushes, no snapping branches, no movement in the trees. It was like the entire world had stopped breathing. Then I heard it, a low hum. At first, it was barely perceptible, more a vibration just beneath my hearing. Gradually, it grew, steady and continuous, never harsh. It reminded me of a distant generator's drone, but smoother, more uniform. The animals remained motionless. Luna, my dog, let out a soft growl but didn't bark or run. She stayed frozen beside me. The hum persisted for about 5 minutes. I tried scanning the darkening sky with my phone's flashlight, but saw nothing unusual. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, or perhaps from the sky itself. As slowly as it began, the humming faded. Suddenly, all the animals burst into motion. Rabbits darted into bushes, squirrels leaped between branches, and deer melted back into the trees as if nothing had happened. Luna jumped up, running a few feet ahead, looking back at me with an eagerness to chase whatever had spooked them. I remained on the porch. The yard was empty, with no signs of disturbance. No footprints, no strange sounds. Only a lingering tension hung in the air. Checking the clock, I realized the entire episode lasted between 15 and 20 minutes. What haunted me most was how every single animal, regardless of size, had simultaneously stopped and stared skyward as if witnessing something invisible to human eyes. I tried finding a logical explanation, a rare bird, distant storm, unusual weather pattern, but nothing came close to explaining such a synchronized, universal reaction. That summer at my uncle's cabin on Lake Carmichael in northern Minnesota, everything felt different. Miles from any neighbors, with only wind and water sounds usually breaking the silence, I decided to try night fishing. My Uncle Pete was away, so I had the place to myself for a week. Around 9 p.m., I packed my gear and headed to the dock. The sky hung heavy with day heat, a thin crescent moon barely illuminating the misty lake. My old fishing rod in hand, I settled on a wooden crate near the boathouse. Rufus, my scrappy wire-haired terrier, curled up at my feet. The first hour passed quietly. Occasional fish splashes and insect hums filled the stillness. Rufus twitched now and then, but mostly stayed calm. Then something changed. A faint, rhythmic tapping started coming from the water, soft but deliberate, like fingers drumming on wood. Not random like an animal might make, but precise. Tap, tap, tap. Once every 2 seconds. I scanned the lake's surface, searching for any explanation, but there was nothing. No shapes, no movement, just that steady, unnatural sound. Later, back home, I couldn't shake the experience. I asked my neighbor Mark if he'd noticed anything strange recently. His dogs had been acting weird too, barking at the tree line before suddenly going silent. I've lived here over a decade. I know these woods, these animals. This felt different. Luna, my dog, watches the sky now with an intensity that suggests she's expecting something. Something that made everything stop and watch. I'm still trying to understand what happened that night. The water was dark, almost black in the moonless parts near the dock. Faint ripples caught my eye, and that's when I noticed a shadow moving just beneath the surface. Not far from the dock, a large, smooth shape slid silently underwater, shifting slowly as if watching. It wasn't like any fish or log I'd seen drifting in a lake before. Rufus lifted his head and growled low, then settled back down. I pulled out my phone, just past midnight. Curiosity pulled me to the railing, leaning over to peer into the depths. The movement was strange, deliberate. Suddenly, the tapping stopped. 10 seconds of absolute silence followed, broken only by my breathing and Rufus's soft snoring. Then it started again. Tap, tap, but from a different spot, maybe a few feet away. The shadow had vanished when I scanned the water. My heart raced as I sat back down. Was I imagining things? Probably just a weird reflection, I told myself. But Rufus remained alert, ears perked, eyes fixed on the water. I tried to focus on fishing, casting my line, but the tapping continued, soft, rhythmic, moving in small circles around the dock. Something else caught my attention. Every time the tapping paused, the water near the dock would reflect moonlight in an odd way. Like something just beneath the surface was catching and shifting the light, moving in a slow, deliberate glow that never broke the water. Rufus stood, tail stiff, and growled again. I scanned the shoreline. Nothing. No people, no boats, just trees and water. Something kept me there, a feeling of being watched, but not threateningly. More like curiosity, a silent study. Eventually, the tapping stopped completely. The water went still. An owl called in the distance. I waited, but nothing more happened. The strange reflections faded, and the lake looked like any normal nighttime lake. Last summer, I worked nights at the Cape Merrow Lighthouse, a solitary job on a rocky point just north of a small fishing village. With nothing but ocean and sky around me, my closest neighbor was miles away down a winding coastal road. My only companion was Toby, a big mutt mix of shepherd and something else. Mellow but alert, perfect for this lonely work. Most nights were quiet. I'd check the light log, monitor the weather, listen for foghorns. Toby usually snoozed near the lantern room while I made my rounds. This night started like any other, clear and cool, a thin crescent moon barely lighting the cliffs. I just finished logging the 11 p.m. weather report. Temp steady, light wind from the northwest, no fog. I sat sipping cold coffee with Toby stretched out at my feet. Around 11:45, Toby's ears suddenly twitched. I looked out the window facing the ocean horizon and saw them. 6 lights hovering low over the water, about a mile offshore. They weren't like normal ship lights. These were steady, bright white, almost too bright, arranged in a loose arc, spaced evenly but not perfectly symmetrical. They didn't move, not a flicker. I grabbed my binoculars and scanned the horizon repeatedly. No boat, no platform, no silhouette. The ocean was mirror calm with no wakes. Those lights just hung there like frozen stars. Weeks later, I still think about that night. Some things can't be explained. Later, I went fishing on Lake Carmichael. Something moved beneath the water. A shadow, strange reflections. I heard odd tapping sounds. I talked to locals who shared rumors about weird nighttime lake phenomena, unexplained lights and sounds. But nothing concrete. I never went. Tough fishing on that lake at night again. Maybe they were fishing boats, but something was off with these lights. Every light I knew out here had a pattern. Red, green, flashing strobes. But these were just steady white points. Toby growled low and padded to the window, pressing his nose against the glass. He stared for a full minute before slowly backing away and sitting on his hunches. I stepped out onto the lantern room's balcony for a closer look. Cool, salty night air surrounded me, quiet except for water lapping against rocks below. The lights remained motionless. When I tried to snap a picture, my phone kept freezing, unable to focus on them properly. Then they started disappearing, not blinking out or moving away, just vanishing. From brightest to dim, each light went dark in a steady, precise sequence. The rightmost light faded first, then the next to its left, continuing until only the leftmost light remained. After a moment, it too winked out like someone flipped a switch. The entire sequence took maybe 2 minutes, with the lights never shifting or moving. Standing on the balcony, I tried to make sense of what I'd witnessed. No boats, no aircraft, no buoys or markers on my charts. Nothing on the marine radio channels. Toby sat quietly by my feet, staring at the empty horizon. I scanned the sky. No planes, helicopters, or satellites. Just stars and a thin crescent moon. Back inside, I attempted to call the village on the landline, but the line was dead, no dial tone. Probably a storm, I thought, and checked the weather radio. Only routine ocean forecasts, the first hint something was strange. The lighthouse's automatic light sensor and backup system showed everything normal. Sleep eluded me that night. I kept watching the ocean, half expecting the lights to return. They never did. Toby stayed close, unusually tense. The next morning, I drove to the village, asking around. Nobody else had seen the lights. Fishermen reported a typical night. The Coast Guard found no unusual traffic or signals. Weather stations confirmed clear skies and calm seas throughout the night. Here's the rewritten text. My back had been acting up, and I'd finally gotten a few hours of sleep that night. It was around 3:40 in the morning when something, maybe a sound, pulled me out of my rest. I looked at the stove clock after getting a drink of water. The house was quiet. Lorna, my wife, was still asleep, and Cedar, the dog, hadn't made a sound. But something felt off. Not fear, exactly, just that low-level awareness, like someone might be standing in the doorway, even though the room was empty. I thought maybe one of the cows had bumped the fence again. We'd had a couple of storms that week, and the wire along the east pasture was sagging. So I dressed, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped outside. The cold hit me first, more than it should have been for early May, with no wind and no bugs. The silence was eerie. No frogs, no night birds, just the gravel under my boots and the creak of the screen door. Cedar didn't follow me, which was unusual. He's an old cattle dog, mostly blind now, but he always perks up when I move around. That night, he stayed curled by the stove, something I didn't notice until later. I headed down the slope behind the barn, my flashlight beam not reaching as far as usual. The fog was patchy, clinging low around the tree line near the northern fence. Everything felt flat, with no depth beyond the first 50 feet. That's when I saw them. All 16 cows bunched up in the far northwest corner of the pasture. They were squeezed together like wet sheep, not making a sound. No lowing, no shifting hooves. Just standing there, shoulder to shoulder, facing the same direction. I called out, a short whistle and a hey there, expecting a response. Later, when I checked my phone, the photos I'd tried to take were blank. Just gray, frames with no images of the lights. They had vanished without moving, unlike anything I'd ever seen. No navigation lights, no aircraft, no floating platforms. Just there, and then gone. Sometimes, when I'm on the balcony with Toby, I watch the horizon and wonder if those lights are still out there somewhere, waiting to come back. The cattle were frozen, every single one staring straight up. This wasn't normal for my herd. They get spooked sometimes, sure, but they're used to coyotes and thunderstorms. They don't usually group up like this, and they certainly don't go this quiet. I could see their sides moving fast in my flashlight's beam, breathing hard, eyes wide. By reflex, I looked up too. Nothing. No clouds, no birds, just open sky and stars, clear as could be. I scanned the fence line, wondering if something had gotten in, maybe a dog or a catamount, though we hadn't seen one in years. The wire was intact, no paw prints, nothing disturbed. I started walking toward them slowly, careful not to trigger a stampede. I'd never seen cattle act like this before, and I've been doing this since I was 20. The tension was palpable. They looked like they might snap and bolt at any moment, but they didn't. They stayed huddled, locked in place, staring skyward. Halfway across the field, I turned off my flashlight. I'm not sure why. Maybe I thought I'd see something better in the dark. And this wasn't town darkness. This was complete darkness. That night, everything had a weird pale tint. The starlight made the field look washed out, dim, and flat. When I looked up again, it was the same stars, the same nothing. But then something strange happened. A pressure built in my chest. Not pain, exactly, but a weight, like something was leaning down from above. Without intending to, I crouched. My knees just buckled. The air felt thicker, not warmer or colder, just heavier. I thought I might be having some kind of episode. I slapped my leg to check if I was awake. I was. The cows hadn't moved. Merle, my big red Angus, who's usually the slowest to spook, had foam around his mouth. His legs were shaking, looking like he might collapse. Then, just like that, the weight lifted. Instantly. Like flicking off a switch. My ears popped as if I'd come down from altitude. The air felt normal again. The cows turned all at once, not bolting, not panicking. They just turned away from the sky, one after another, as if someone had called them from behind. They started drifting apart, walking slowly, like whatever had held them was simply gone. I sat on the porch, with Cedar pressed against my leg, like he used to when he was young. He kept staring toward the pasture, even after sunrise. Later that morning, I checked the ground where the cows had been. Dry, with no burn marks, no circles, no impressions, just slightly flattened grass where they'd stood. The vet came that afternoon and found nothing wrong. No disease, no stress markers. But the cows were different, quiet, barely eating for a day or two. I've seen weird things out here before, insect lights on the horizon, distant humming. Always chalked it up to weather or military tests from Dugway. This felt different. Something about how those cows looked, how it felt in my chest, how Cedar wouldn't come outside until it was over. I've only told Lorna, and she thinks I dreamed it, says I was probably sleepwalking like in my 30s. But I know what happened. Now the cows won't go near that corner. They avoid it like an invisible fence. Nothing grows differently there, no dead patches, but they won't cross into it. Last week, I watched Cedar at the window around 3:30 a.m., standing stiff and staring across the yard. He doesn't see well anymore, but something held his attention. When I approached, he growled, a low, unfamiliar rumble I hadn't heard in years. I looked out too. The sky was clear, full of stars. Nothing moving, nothing there. It started around 9:30 that night up in the shed behind my brother-in-law's place in northern Arkansas. Ryan, my high school friend who still called me Sully, and I were fiddling with an old transceiver, just a beat-up icon rig connected to a dipole between two poplars. We'd been chasing signals since college, never really outgrowing it. Some guys hunt, some fish. We chase radio waves. We used our registered call signs, hopping through 20 and 40-meter bands. Talking to other ham radio operators about weather, gear, local stuff. Sometimes we'd catch long-distance skip off the ionosphere. That night, though, we weren't getting much, just a little chatter from Tennessee, a guy in Texas with a bad connection. Here's the rewritten text. The radio crackled with an unusual signal. A short burst first caught our attention, initially dismissed as frequency bleed or a key test, but it returned, precise as a metronome. A clean pulse, about a second long, repeated at perfect intervals. No voice, no identification, just a tone. Ryan leaned closer to the speaker. "You hearing that?" I nodded. We listened intently. The signal remained consistent. Same pitch, same rhythm. I logged the frequency, 14.312 megahertz, and scanned through my laptop's records. No matching beacon emerged, which wasn't entirely surprising. Amateur radio operators often run unofficial tests or broadcast homemade Morse signals. What struck us was the signal's extraordinary clarity. No fading, no drift. It felt like the source was right next door. Suspecting a local experimenter, Ryan grabbed the microphone. "CQ, this is K5RTC. Anyone out there on 14312? Silence. Then exactly 5 seconds later, the tone returned. Louder, closer. Ryan's eyes met mine. "That's not just me, right?" I confirmed. Something was different. We tried again, requesting identification. 5 seconds passed, the tone sounded. Then, unexpectedly, our own transmission repeated back, word for word, wrapped in static but comprehensible. We tested further. I spoke into the mic, testing 1, 2, 3. 5 seconds later, the tone. Then my voice returned, slightly distorted, almost reconstructed. The cadence felt wrong, the inflection unnatural. The transmission evolved. The steady tone continued, then stopped, then resumed. Suddenly, it began replaying fragments of our earlier conversations, snippets out of sequence. Copy that. We're hearing noise. The winds are picking up. One fragment repeated, glitching. Don't. 3 times. Ryan lowered the volume. We sat in stunned silence. Ryan was sitting with his arms crossed, staring at the radio, which was making an odd clicking sound like a Geiger counter. Random, unsteady bursts I'd never heard from that set before. He told me to stop recording and play it back. The signals were clean. No Doppler, no fade. This wasn't a bounce. I stepped outside the shed. Everything was eerily silent. No wind, no bugs, no movement. The trees stood completely still. Normally you'd hear cicadas at this time of night, but it was like someone had placed a lid over the woods. I walked around with my flashlight, checking the antenna. Still up, coke still tight. When I returned, Ryan looked at me and said, "I don't want to keep listening to this." We unplugged the radio completely. Hard kill. I even unscrewed the antenna cable from the back, just to be sure. We sat drinking warm beer, discussing possible pranks, but neither of us truly believed that was the explanation. His property was isolated, down a gravel road off another gravel road. No cell towers, nearest neighbors over a mile away. Even if someone had rigged a repeater or SDR setup nearby, it couldn't explain the precisely matching delay or the strange voices. To clear our heads, we walked the tree line with flashlights. Past midnight, still no owl. Side sounds, not even the creek, which should have been gurgling from recent rain. Suddenly, the shed's single bulb flickered, dimming, brightening, dimming again, like a power brownout, though the rest of the house remained lit. We froze. Then the tone started again from inside the shed. No power, no radio plugged in, just that single pitch, louder now, seemingly coming from the air itself. We didn't go back in. We backed away slowly, walked to the house, locked the door. Around 3 a.m., the sound stopped. Morning revealed everything intact. The radio was cold, no damage, antenna fine. But the laptop logs had been wiped, not just that night session, but everything. Empty directories. Ryan didn't want to discuss it further. He's not the type to dwell on strange occurrences. The night shift at the downtown airport control tower can get pretty strange, especially during those quiet hours between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. I'm Jamie, a radar controller with 5 years of experience, and I've seen my share of unusual situations. But nothing compares to what happened on that cool, clear night in late April. The city lights below looked like a glowing grid, and despite the late hour, the airspace was surprisingly active. Cargo planes and domestic flights were moving in and out regularly. Around 2:15 a.m., something caught my eye. A blip on the radar about 50 miles northeast of the airport, sitting at 30,000 feet. At first, it seemed routine. Planes cruise at that altitude all the time. But something felt off. The blip didn't match any flight plans or transponder codes. I ran checks through multiple systems and consulted with other controllers. No matches. While unusual, this could happen with military or private jets operating under restricted codes. Then I noticed it wasn't moving, just hovering, completely still at 30,000 feet. I radioed a nearby commercial jet from Boston, asking if they saw anything. The captain's response was unsettling, a faint light above them, but nothing definitive. Suddenly, the blip started climbing. First slowly, then rapidly. It shot straight up like something heading into space, maintaining a perfectly straight line with no course adjustments. I double-checked everything. Both our radar and the secondary system at a neighboring tower confirmed the same impossible movement. As it climbed past 35,000, then 40,000 feet, I knew this was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. My colleague had recently talked about taking a break from radio, saying he'd experienced something strange. Now, watching this inexplicable movement, I understood why. And then it vanished. No signals, no transponder code, just gone. My attempts to reach other regional centers yielded nothing. No one else had picked up anything similar on their scopes. I kept reviewing the radar tape, searching for some missed detail, but the blip remained clean. No echoes, no breakdowns, no interference. The official report only tells part of the story. What followed defies explanation. After logging the event and filing my report, I stepped out onto the observation deck for some fresh air. The night was quiet, the city's distant hum steady and constant. When I looked up, the sky was clear, but something felt off. A pale bluish sheen hung exactly where the blip had disappeared. It lasted only seconds, but something about it felt fundamentally wrong, like the air itself had shifted around me. Back inside, my radio scanner erupted with static. Beneath the white noise, a faint low humming emerged. This wasn't coming from the equipment. I could feel it deep in my chest, a physical vibration. Glancing around, no one else seemed to notice. I checked the radio again, and the hum vanished. I shrugged it off and finished my paperwork. As I walked toward the break room, the lights flickered, just once, but enough to make me pause. Old buildings have air electrical quirks, but the timing felt deliberate. Outside the tower windows, the city looked completely normal. No flashes, no sirens, no emergency vehicles. Stepping outside again, hoping to shake off the strange energy, the humming returned, softer now. A strange metallic scent hung in the air, like ozone mixed with something unidentifiable. I didn't want to linger. I left and drove home. The rest of the night passed quietly. The next morning's news showed nothing. No reports of strange lights or aircraft, no military alerts. Days later, a buddy at the FAA mentioned some chatter about a ghost target in the system, but nothing was confirmed. I kept thinking about that light, the way the blip climbed straight up, and the unexplained humming in the tower. Whatever it wasn't like any aircraft I've ever tracked. Something happened that night, something I can't explain. Early morning light filtered through the trees as I sat in the park, my dog Juno curled at my feet. The world felt quiet and still, my favorite time of day. With my second-hand binoculars, I was scanning the treetops along the ridge about a mile away, watching for the pair of red-tailed hawks I'd spotted yesterday. Suddenly, something caught the light behind the hill. I blinked and refocused. A disc-shaped object hovered maybe 200 yards above the tree line, reflecting weak sunlight like a mirror. It was perfectly motionless, not moving with any wind or air current I could detect. I gripped the binoculars tightly, trying to get a better look. Then it vanished, just blinked out, as if a light switch had been flipped. The sky behind the hill was clear, no clouds, no obstruction. I lowered the binoculars and scanned the ridge with my naked eyes. Nothing. No shape, no gleam, no movement. Almost instinctively, I called Juno to heel and stood up, squinting toward where the object had been. The fog was thinning, but the hill looked unchanged, just trees, rocks, and scattered wildflowers. I tried to rationalize what I'd seen, telling myself it was probably a reflection from something else. Maybe a piece of metal or an old hunting blind with a reflective tarp. But I knew these hills, and nothing like that had ever been there before. The entire incident lasted maybe 10 seconds. No one else was around. The park remained quiet, with only the soft rustling of leaves and Juno's nails clicking on the wooden bench breaking the silence. That afternoon, strange details emerged. My phone battery had inexplicably drained to zero, though I hadn't used it much. The last message log showed the screen had been active at the exact moment I saw the disk, though I didn't remember checking it. I was more confused than scared, unable to explain what I'd witnessed. I was flying from Bend to Missoula that late afternoon in early spring, piloting a rented Cessna 182 out of Prineville. Nothing fancy, just an older but solid aircraft I'd flown many times before, usually to visit my brother and his kids. The weather was decent, a bit choppy near John Day, but otherwise clear and steady. I took off around 5:10 p.m. with the sun still high but casting that soft golden light across the landscape. Visibility was excellent, and the Cascades stretched out to the west, their peaks still heavy with snow. At 9,500 feet, I settled into my usual course. About 40 minutes into the flight, something caught my eye off to the right. At first, I thought it was just sunlight glinting off another plane, maybe at a higher altitude. But there were no traffic advisories, and the Garmin showed nothing. I wasn't even on a busy flight path. What I saw was a metallic sphere, smooth and reflective. Not massive, maybe 6 or 7 feet across, though it was hard to judge precisely. No wings, no exhaust, no markings, just silent and still. I watched it for a solid 10 seconds before realizing it was moving, slowly but definitely keeping pace with me. I radioed Bozeman Center. November 652 Charlie, do you have traffic at my 2 same altitude? Their response came back negative. When I tried banking slightly left, the sphere adjusted immediately. I pulled back on the yoke, gaining about 100 feet, and it climbed perfectly with me. There was something fundamentally wrong about how it moved. Not aggressive, just tracking. It stayed with me for 18 minutes. I know because I kept glancing at the dash clock, constantly expecting it to peel away or drop back, but it never did. Just hovered, steady and unnerving. Later, talking to my neighbor Ellie, a retired forest ranger, she smiled and said, "Sometimes the woods and hills play tricks on us. Reflections light the way, the brain fills in gaps." But her eyes didn't look quite convinced. I haven't been back to that spot yet. Juno, my dog, seems fine, just eager for walks and treats. I keep wondering if I actually saw something, or if my mind just twisted the morning's light into something strange. Either way, the binoculars stay on the shelf by the door, just in case. Wobbling, I pulled out my phone to snap a picture. The moment the camera was aimed out the window, the object drifted slightly backward, almost like it knew I was trying to capture it. All I got was sky glare. Suddenly, it stopped following me. Hanging midair, maybe 2 body lengths behind and to the right, it paused for a second before shooting straight upward, not at an angle, but like someone had yanked it skyward with an invisible string. No acceleration, just gone. Complete silence. I stared out the window for a long time, not even thinking to contact the tower again. When I landed in Missoula, my hands were shaking during the post-flight checks. I said nothing to the hangar guy, just signed the log and grabbed the rental car. That night, I scanned flight radar for any unusual military operations. Nothing. The next day, I called the Proughville airport to ask about drone activity along that corridor. The guy said no reports. I claimed I hadn't seen anything. I haven't seen it again, but now I always look. I'm a park ranger at Cedar Ridge Preserve in the Cascades. It's not a huge park, mostly untouched forest, with a few hiking trails and remote campsites. Once you're a few miles from the main parking lot, it gets quiet. My shifts involve checking trails and ensuring visitor safety. Part of my job is monitoring motion sensor cameras along less traveled paths. They typically capture wildlife: deer, raccoons, occasional elk. Sometimes hikers or campers show up. The footage is usually mundane. I review it on my laptop in the ranger station during slow evening or morning hours. A few weeks back, I was reviewing clips from Trail 7, a route that winds along a ridge and descends into a dense fir grove. It's not popular due to rough terrain and zero cell service. Scrolling through the previous day's videos, something caught my eye around 7:15 p.m., just as the sun was setting. The camera had captured a figure standing in a clearing about 20 feet from the lens. The strange part, the figure wasn't moving. The first time I saw it, the figure was unnaturally still, not like someone waiting or standing, but like a statue frozen in place. I rewound the clip multiple times. About 6 feet tall and slender, it had no discernible details. No clothing folds, no hair, nothing familiar. Its surface was smooth, like polished stone or plastic, completely featureless. The arms hung straight down, and it never blinked or shifted weight. The motion sensor clip was only 10 seconds long. I thought maybe the sensor had just cut off mid-recording, so I checked the previous footage. Nothing was there. No approaching or departing figure, no footprints, no animals in any of the frames. The trail leading to the clearing was empty, and an eerie silence hung over everything. No bird sounds, no wind rustling leaves. Later that night, I visited the clearing in person. It was exactly as shown in the footage, a small open ground surrounded by dense fir trees. The recent rain had left the dirt soft. I searched for tracks and found only deer and squirrel prints, no human footprints, no tire marks. 2 nights later, the camera captured the same figure again, standing in almost the exact same spot. Motionless. Then it simply vanished. Not faded, not blurred, not moving out of frame. Just gone between 2 consecutive frames. I checked the timestamps repeatedly. No glitching, no indication of movement. The footage was grainy and low resolution, showing only a blurry silhouette. But that unnatural smoothness remained, as if the figure wasn't quite solid. I showed the clip to a coworker who suggested it might be someone in a morph suit, but that didn't explain the sudden disappearance. Something about the whole experience felt wrong. It wasn't just the figure itself, but the way the forest felt whenever I approached that clearing. An unsettling, unnatural quiet that seemed to defy explanation. The forest felt different that evening, a stillness so thick it seemed like the trees were holding their breath. I decided to hike the trail about an hour before sunset, curious to see the spot where something strange had been captured on camera. My border collie mix, Sadi, came with me, normally calm but always alert. We reached the clearing around 6:30 p.m. and settled on a fallen log. At first, nothing happened. Sadi sniffed around, her ears perked, but she didn't bark or show any signs of nervousness. The silence was profound, the kind that makes you feel like something is about to happen. Just as the sun dipped below the horizon, I saw it. A shape stood at the far edge of the clearing, exactly where the camera had previously recorded it. Smooth and featureless, the silhouette blended perfectly into the dusky shadows, motionless. I remained completely still. Sadi tensed beside me, her hackles rising. The figure simply stood watching. There was no sense of threat, but something felt distinctly wrong. It didn't breathe, blink, or move, just remained absolutely still. After about 5 minutes, it vanished. One moment present, the next, nothing. No sound, no movement. A low growl escaped Sadi, and I stood up, my heart racing. We didn't stay long after that. Since then, I've monitored the trail cameras. The figure hasn't returned, at least not that I've seen. But sometimes when I walk through the woods near that clearing, I get a feeling of being watched. Not by an animal or a person, but by something else, something just beyond perception. I work at a small weather station outside Flagstaff, Arizona. It's nothing glamorous, mostly gathering data from weather balloons and sending reports to the university and local agencies. The station sits on a remote plateau, surrounded by forest and desert. Last September, during my late afternoon shift, I was preparing to launch the daily weather balloon. It was just before dusk, and I was alone except for my border collie mix, Juno, smart as can be and always nearby. The weather was clear, with that dry desert air that feels crisp but not harsh. The sun was dropping behind the San Francisco peaks, painting the sky in oranges and purples. I launched the balloon around 6:10 p.m., as I always do. Just another routine day, or so I thought. What it was, I don't know, and I don't expect to ever understand. It's just part of the forest now, a quiet, inexplicable presence. We were tracking a weather balloon, one of those big latex ones filled with helium, carrying a small package of scientific equipment. Cameras and sensors recorded temperature, pressure, and humidity, sending real-time data back to our station. As the balloon rose slowly, climbing to around 30 kilometers before its usual burst, I monitored the receiver and watched the grainy black and white camera feed. I expected to see the familiar landscape, dark forest outlines and desert patches moving beneath us. Something unusual caught my eye at about 5,000 meter altitude. A dark shape moved alongside the balloon, matching its speed and height with uncanny precision. Initially, I thought it might be a high-flying bird, perhaps a hawk or eagle. But this wasn't right. The shape was too large, too solid, and moved without the typical erratic wing movements. For 15 minutes, the object maintained its position about 200 meters horizontally from the balloon. Juno, my dog, sat nearby, watching me intently. I radioed my supervisor, Mark, to confirm what I was seeing, but he reported no unusual signals from their eastern station. Suddenly, at the 20-minute mark, the object accelerated straight upward, faster than anything I'd ever seen in that sky. The balloon's camera view went fuzzy as the distance increased, and the object vanished into the upper atmosphere within seconds. Back at the station, I downloaded the footage. Reviewing the video on my laptop confirmed what I'd seen, a dark oval shape moving smoothly beside the balloon. No wings, no lights. Yet the GPS data showed no disturbances, and nearby radar scans detected nothing. The entire encounter remained a mystery, witnessed, recorded, but unexplained. Stations I ran the data through every filter and software we have, and nothing explained it. The night I flew my drone near the edge of town was like any other quiet evening. Farms were thinning out and trees grew sparse. Low clouds stretched across the sky, like a faint white sheet catching the last hints of daylight. I'd been practicing drone maneuvers and felt confident enough to push a bit further than usual. I showed the video to Mark the next day. He just shrugged and suggested maybe it was a rare weather phenomenon or a trick of light and shadow, but neither of us could find a solid explanation. My DJI Mavic Pro was about 500 or 600 feet out flying level when something caught my eye. A small glint in the sky ahead, sharp and bright, reflecting a cold, hard light. It wasn't a plane or a star or satellite. Definitely too low and strange. Since then, I've watched every balloon launch closely, hoping to catch something similar. Nothing. Just the usual slow rise, pop, and data dump. I moved the drone closer. The controller showed a solid signal and crisp video feed. As I inched toward the object, curiosity burning, I couldn't shake how precise and unnatural it seemed. Sometimes I think about how it matched the balloon's altitude and speed without a sound or visible signature beyond what the camera caught, and how suddenly it shot straight up faster than anything I've ever seen. Juno still likes to follow me out to the launch site, especially at dusk. She stares into the sky more than usual, like she remembers something I don't. I keep the footage saved, but don't show it around. Most people at the station think I'm nuts when I mention it. Honestly, I'm not even sure what I saw. I spotted a strange glint hovering motionless among the clouds. The drone's camera automatically adjusted its angle, giving me a clearer view. But the object remained vague, almost like a curved reflective surface that distorted the clouds behind it. Suddenly, the drone's controls started malfunctioning. Commands to move left or right were delayed or completely ignored. When I tried to pull back, it kept drifting forward toward the mysterious object. The signal strength plummeted from full bars to just one, and the video feed became choppy with static lines and pixelation. I frantically hit the return to home button, hoping to override the interference. Instead of turning back, the drone just hovered in place. A warning flash, head on the screen, signal lost. The last frame showed that gleaming, undefined shape surrounded by shifting clouds before everything went black. For a solid 30 seconds, the signal remained dead. I stood frozen, hands gripping the controller, scanning the empty sky and quiet field. Without warning, the video feed blinked back on. The drone was now far from the original glint, drifting slowly over the cornfield. But the video was completely scrambled. Colors distorted, static flickering, shapes blurred and twisting like a bad television signal. Switching channels and resetting the connection did nothing to clear the distortion. The drone's GPS signal showed an impossible path. The recorded video file was corrupted, with missing parts and skipped moments. A few seconds appeared to show the glint again, but in such low quality, it was unidentifiable. I landed the drone as quickly as possible. When I picked it up, I noticed something odd. A thin, misty film covered the camera lens. This was strange because the day was dry. I wiped it off with my sleeve, but it returned within minutes. That night, I examined the footage on my laptop. The normal sections were clear, sky, field, barn, but the sequence near the glint was completely mangled. No sound, just static and unrecognizable shape fragments. I tried recovery software, but made no progress. The next day, I returned to the field to investigate, hoping to find some explanation for the bizarre incident. The weekend at Lake Ida started out pretty normal. We were camping in a quiet spot, just a few RVs scattered around during the off-season. Our site was tucked back near the lake, about 50 yards downhill through some pine trees. No hookups, just us, our dog Tiller, and the possibility of a small campfire. Friday afternoon was mild, temperatures in the high 60s, dropping to the 40s at night. I parked my old JCO pop-up near the back edge of the site, facing the trees. Tiller, our lab mix, settled in quickly. He always acts like he's on security detail in the woods. Saturday night was when things got strange. We'd grilled hot dogs, had a couple of beers, and turned in early around 9:30. I was scrolling on my phone while Chelsea read, using her headlamp. Our cell signal was weak, just a couple bars if I stood by the window. Then everything went dark. No gradual dimming, no warning, just instant blackout. Her headlamp, my phone, the small LED reading light, all dead simultaneously. When I asked Chelsea if she'd accidentally hit something, her confused response told me something was off. My phone wouldn't turn on, acting like it hadn't been charged in days. The backup flashlight was equally useless. Tiller started whining, not barking, but a low, restless sound. He paced between the door and window, clearly unsettled. Later, talking to drone enthusiast friends, they found the whole incident bizarre. They'd never heard of such interference, especially in an area with minimal radio traffic. Some suggested a weather balloon or reflective kite, but I checked around and found nothing. Weeks passed, and the experience felt like a weird glitch. Yet I couldn't shake the unexplained loss and return of control, or how the mysterious object completely vanished from the sky. Now when I'm flying, I sometimes get this eerie feeling, like something's watching just beyond the edge of the video feed. At dusk, when the sunlight hits just right, I swear I catch a familiar glint. But when I look closer, there's never anything there. The ground shows no footprints, no debris, nothing unusual. The barn looks the same, and the spot where I lost signal remains an empty sky with normal clouds. Chelsea zipped up her jacket and we stepped out onto the gravel. The night was eerily quiet, not completely silent, but stripped of its usual sounds. Crickets chirped faintly, but the usual background noise, of frogs and rustling brush, was gone. 3 bright white lights appeared above the tree line, maybe 100 yards away. They moved incredibly slowly, like someone dragging a spoon through syrup. The light stayed perfectly level, spaced in a triangle formation with no blinking or color changes, just a steady, almost deliberate drift across the sky. Tiller sat nearby, trembling. We tried our phones, no signal. The lights drifted behind some tall pines, disappeared momentarily, then reappeared further along in a shallow arc over the lake. Something felt off. These lights moved too low and too slowly to be a plane, and there was absolutely no engine sound. After about half a minute, the lights stopped, just hung there. Chelsea whispered, "Go get the camera." I climbed back into the RV and grabbed our point-and-shoot digital camera from the side cabinet. But when I tried to power it on, nothing happened. Completely dead. I checked the battery. Everything seemed fine, but it wouldn't turn on. We realized the entire RV was dark. Normally, there's always a faint glow from the fridge panel or battery monitor, but everything was out. We weren't plugged in, but the house battery should have been full enough to keep basic systems running. Chelsea checked the switch panel. Nothing worked. Tiller whined softly. The lights remained motionless, hanging in place as if watching us, which sounds ridiculous, but that's exactly how it felt. Then slowly, they began moving straight upward. First, the lights went out around 11:30 that night. Everything suddenly went black without warning, or flicker no signal on my phone. The wind picked up outside with trees creaking, but no storm or rain. I grabbed the flashlight and checked the fuse box downstairs. Everything looked fine. Finley, my medium-sized terrier mix with a graying muzzle, was restless, pacing near the door. Wes stayed inside, windows shutting. Then slowly something started happening. First, no sound. Then a little faster within 5 seconds. They were higher than the trees then. Higher than the ridge another 10 seconds. And they were just tiny points above the lake. Then they blinked out when at a time left, right, center, like someone flipping off switches. As soon as the last stone disappeared, the crickets came back. It was like someone had turned the world back on. The breeze kicked up again. A branch cracked somewhere in the woods. Tiller stood and stretched, then walked to the water bowl. Like nothing happened. Chelsea went inside and tried the overhead light again. It flicked on dim at first, then back to normal. My phone buzzed with a delayed notification, and the cannon powered on like nothing had ever been wrong. Everything was working again. I checked the house battery display, 95, same as the day before. I checked the fuses, the inverter, everything. Nothing tripped, nothing fried. Chelsea didn't want to stay another night. And honestly, we packed up in the morning and drove out. I told the ranger at the gate that we'd had an equipment issue and cut the weekend short. They didn't ask questions back home. I charged the cannon fully and tried taking a few test shots. Worked fine. No issues. Went to plug my phone and found it at 67 cents, exactly where it had been before it died. It wasn't like the battery had drained it, just shut off. Same with the RV systems. Even took it to a buddy who does repairs, has the battery and solar controller all clean, no faults. We haven't been back to that campground since. Tiller still gets jittery around flashlights, which he never did before. Chelsea keeps the camera in a drawer now and hasn't touched it since power came back around 1:15 a.m. And I immediately checked my security camera feed. After an internet and power outage, I was eager to see what might have happened in the yard. The living room lights flickered, the fridge hummed back to life, and my phone final loud. He displayed the camera footage. What I saw was bizarre. The video from 11:30 p.m. was grainy and black and white, but the yard's details were still visible. The wooden fence, the tall spruce tree, the patch of grass where Finley often digs. About 20 seconds into the recording, something unusual appeared. A smooth, silent shape glided from the right side of the frame, hovering just above the treetops. It wasn't like any aircraft I'd seen before, more of a rounded, elongated silhouette with soft edges and no visible wings. No lights, no flash, just a quiet, deliberate movement about 10 feet above the grass, drifting toward the left side of the frame. Its motion was unnervingly fluid, almost like it was floating underwater. Finley was on the porch, barking occasionally, but otherwise, everything was eerily silent. The object moved with such purpose, as if surveying or searching the area. For about 45 seconds, it drifted before disappearing past the camera's edge. Immediately after, the footage turned to static. The video became completely corrupted, skipping, freezing, flickering like a broken TV signal. No matter what I tried, I couldn't recover or view any footage beyond that point. The file was damaged and unreadable. Flashlight in hand, I rushed outside to investigate. The yard looked completely normal. No footprints, no scorch marks, no broken branches. Finley circled the area, but didn't show any unusual interest. I checked all the house's electronics, and apart from the power outage, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The next morning, I casually asked my neighbor about the power outage. They confirmed they'd lost power too, but hadn't noticed anything strange. I kept the footage to myself, watching and re-watching it over the next week, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. I'd been patrolling Cedar Ridge Park for years, and weird things weren't new to me. Broken branches, strange sounds, you get used to it. But that night in late April was different. The trail was muddy from an earlier rain, leaving clear prints everywhere. Luna, my German Shepherd mix, was with me as always. She's usually calm but alert, poking through wet leaves and sniffing logs like she always does. We'd been out about 2 hours, and the fading light was making the woods feel colder than April should. Halfway down the slope, the trail dipped near a small creek clearing. That's when I saw something I couldn't explain. The prints were massive, way too big for any animal in the park, definitely not human. I stopped and knelt down to look closer. These weren't normal tracks. They were circular, like perfect rings pressed into the mud. Each one was maybe 1.5 feet across, forming concentric circles that looked like water ripples carved into the ground. Back home, strange things were happening too. My cameras usually worked fine, but one night's footage was different. A weird shape appeared, then vanished. Was it a drone? A weather balloon? Nothing made sense. No blinking lights, no noise, no explanation. A few nights later, the power went out again. Same time, same pattern. The camera showed nothing unusual, just darkness until the power returned. My backyard started feeling different. Something felt like it was watching from the trees. Even Finley, my dog, would growl softly, staring into the darkness. One night, sitting on the back porch late, the air cold and still, I thought I saw a faint glow moving slowly behind the trees. But when I blinked, it was gone. No flashes, no sounds, just a feeling that something was drifting just out of sight. I still can't explain what happened. The broken footage, the unexplained tracks, the strange presence. It all keeps me up at night, wondering what might have been captured or lost. The mud was soft, capturing every detail. Yet these 6 prints stood out, perfectly round, evenly spaced, and then nothing. Luna growled softly beside me, her ears pricked, staring intently into the bushes without moving. I scanned the underbrush with my flashlight, but everything looked normal. No broken branches, no other footprints, nothing to explain the strange impressions. It felt like something had simply hovered above the ground and pressed down in a deliberate pattern. I checked the surrounding area thoroughly, finding no tire tracks, boot prints, or intersecting animal tracks. The prints were too long for a person or deer walking, and they had vanished near a clump of bushes without any drag marks or signs of lifting. I tried to rationalize it as a local kid's prank, maybe using a stencil or mold, but something didn't add up. Why 6 precise circles and then nothing? I called it into the station, and the dispatcher instructed me to collect photos and samples. I snapped pictures with my phone, placing my glove beside a print for scale. Luna stayed close, clearly unsettled. We remained in the clearing for another 20 minutes, and that's when I noticed the forest had gone eerily quiet. No birds, no frogs, no crickets, just a tense silence, as if the woods were holding their breath. Then a faint sound emerged. Not quite wind, but a low, pulsing hum coming from the direction of the prints. It wasn't steady, but rhythmic. I searched for any sign of machinery or power lines, but saw only forest and creek. Luna's hackles were up again, and she continued to growl softly at the same spot. Not wanting to push our luck, I grabbed her leash and started back toward the trail. Glancing over my shoulder, I saw the prints remained undisturbed, exactly where they had been. The humming seemed to fade with distance, but never completely disappeared until we reached the station. Later that night, reviewing the photos, I noticed something else. The edges of the prints looked too precise, almost unnaturally clean. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't put my finger on what. One night, while working the overnight shift at a 24-hour pharmacy just outside St. Louis, something strange caught my attention. Around 2:30 in the morning, a tall man stood motionless across the street by the self-storage parking lot, positioned under an old sodium street lamp. He was wearing a heavy coat and a hat pulled low over his face. At first, I thought he might be waiting for a ride. The pharmacy was quiet, with only a few old customers picking up medications and occasional sketchy characters looking for cold medicine. I watched him from behind the counter, noticing he wasn't moving, no pacing, no phone checking, just standing perfectly still facing the store. When a customer distracted me momentarily, I looked back and he was gone. I didn't think much of it initially, but the next night, at the exact same time and place, he reappeared. His posture was identical, unmoving. I'd ring up customers and keep glancing over, and he remained in the precise same spot. Curious, I approached the front doors to get a better look, though I didn't step outside due to the freezing temperature. Something about his presence felt unsettling, yet undefined. This wasn't the first time I'd encountered something unexplainable. During my work as a ranger, I once discovered mysterious circular tracks in a clearing, perfectly formed, as if made by a machine, with no signs of vehicles, tools, or human presence. An older ranger mentioned past reports of strange lights near the park, but nothing official. For days I checked the clearing. The tracks slowly faded, but the mystery lingered. Sometimes at night in the ranger station, I'd hear a faint hum, barely perceptible, like something waiting in the dark woods. My dog Luna's ears would twitch, though she no longer seemed to react. These experiences felt like quiet reminders that some things exist beyond our understanding. I first noticed him standing across the street, just under the street lamp near the storage lot. The gate was locked, the office closed, and something felt off. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was homeless, just killing time. By the third night, I decided to mention it to Mark, the pharmacist I worked with. "You ever notice that guy across the street?" I pointed, but Mark squinted and said he didn't see anyone. I figured the angle was wrong or he'd walked away. But the next night, he was back again. I opened the door, letting the cold air rush in, and called out. No response. Not even a flinch. I went back inside, watching through the glass as he remained motionless. This continued for about a week. Same time, same spot. An uneasy feeling grew. Not exactly fear, but a sense of being watched. I started checking the security cameras, scrolling through recordings from the nights I remembered seeing him. Nothing. No movement, no figure under the streetlight. I tested the cameras during my break, waving my arms in the same spot. The feed worked fine, but he wasn't there. I even saved clips, comparing them to photos on my phone. On my phone, he was clear as day. On the cameras, empty space. I started taking pictures through the window whenever I saw him. Most were blurry, but a couple came out okay. When I showed them to Mark, he just shrugged. Could be anything, might just be a shadow. But I knew what I saw. The night I last saw him was a Thursday, with a light dusting of snow earlier in the evening. By 2:30, the sidewalks had turned icy. I worked overnight shifts at a 24-hour pharmacy just outside St. Louis, running the front register and stocking shelves while the pharmacist managed the back. It was usually a quiet job, mostly old folks picking up medications at odd hours, with occasional sketchy characters looking for cold medicine we no longer sold. Something had been off since January when I first noticed him across the street. This particular night, I'd been checking the front window every few minutes out of habit. Sure enough, he was there again, but closer this time, right at the edge of our lot, still under the light, completely motionless. Then I saw something that made my stomach drop. The snow between the street and where he stood was completely untouched. No footprints leading in, no marks behind him, just smooth, pristine snow all the way to the curb. I stared, trying to make sense of it. I opened the door and shouted, "Hey, you okay?" Silence. No reaction. My hand remained on the lock, heart pounding, though he hadn't done anything. Something felt fundamentally wrong. After about 30 seconds, I shut the door and went to check the monitors in the back office. Nothing. Just empty black and white asphalt on the screen. When I ran back, he was still there, seemingly not having moved a centimeter. I took a photo with my phone and zoomed in. His face wasn't visible, or was it? The more I stared, the more I realized there wasn't a face at all, just darkness under the hat brim. Not a shadow, but something more unsettling. No features, no shine, not even a skin reflection. Unnerved, I backed away, locked myself in the back room, and waited. I didn't tell Mark. How could I even explain what I'd seen? Around 3:15, when I checked again, he was gone, completely vanished. I kept looking, checking cameras, walking the lot, even crossing the street during daylight to search for any sign, cigarette butts, trash, anything. Nothing. I still have the photo. It's grainy and dark. Most people I've shown it to dismiss it as a coat rack or some trick of light, but I know what I saw. Around 2:30 in the morning, a tall figure stood by the edge of the self-storage parking lot. Under an old sodium street lamp, he was motionless, just a silhouette in a heavy coat and a low-brimmed hat. From behind the counter, I watched him, thinking at first he might be waiting for a ride. A customer distracted me briefly, and when I looked back, he was gone. But the next night, he returned at the same time, in the same spot, completely still. No pacing, no phone, no movement at all. I'd ring up a customer, glance over, and he'd be exactly as before. Curiosity got the better of me. I went to the front doors and peeked out, not stepping outside because of the freezing cold. I tried to understand why he was there. The storage gate was locked, the office closed for hours. I rationalized he was probably just a homeless person killing time. On the third night, I mentioned him to Mark, the pharmacist. "You ever notice that guy across the street?" Mark looked and said he didn't see anyone. I thought maybe the angle was wrong or he'd walked away, but he returned the next night. This time, I opened the door slightly, leaning out into the cold. I called out, not yelling, just a loud, "Hey!" No response, no reaction at all. Back inside, I watched through the glass, feeling increasingly uneasy. For about a week, this continued. Same time, same spot. Even when I wasn't looking directly at him, I felt watched, tense. I started checking the security cameras, the dome cam by the front doors, another pointing outside. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't explain what. The security cameras angled toward the parking lot were connected to a cheap monitor in the manager's office. I began scrolling through the night's recordings, searching for any sign of the figure I'd seen. At first, nothing seemed out of place. I wasn't sure if the cameras could capture that far, so during my break, I went out to the spot and waved my arms around. The test confirmed the cameras worked fine. When I compared my phone's photos with the store's camera footage, something strange emerged. The times matched perfectly, but the spaces looked completely different. On my phone, he was clearly visible. On the cameras, nothing but empty space. This discovery unsettled me. I started taking more pictures through the window whenever I spotted him. Some were blurry, but 2 came out clearly. I showed them to Mark, who dismissed my concerns with a casual shrug. "Could be anything. Might just be a shadow," he said, clearly avoiding deeper discussion. The last night was a Thursday. A light snow had fallen earlier, leaving a thin dusting that made the sidewalks icy by 2:30 a.m. I'd been checking the front window periodically, and he was there again. This time, he wasn't across the street, but right at the edge of our parking lot, still under the light, still motionless. Then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There were no footprints in the snow. None. The sidewalk between the street and where he stood was completely untouched. No tracks leading in, no marks behind him. Just smooth, unbroken snow stretching to the curb. I stared, trying to make sense of it. Leaning out the door, I shouted a bit louder, "Hey, you okay?" No response. My hand stayed near the lock, heart racing. Something felt fundamentally wrong, though he hadn't made any threatening moves. After about 30 seconds, I retreated inside and checked the monitors. The spot was just empty, black and white asphalt. When I returned to the front, he was still there, not having moved a centimeter. I zoomed in on the photo I'd just taken. His face wasn't visible, or was it? What I saw wasn't just a shadow from his hat. It was something else entirely. Just darkness. No features, no shine, nothing. Not a single trace left behind. I retreated to the back room, securing the door, holding my breath and waiting. Mark never heard about what happened that night. How could I even begin to describe what I saw? Around 3:15, the figure vanished as quickly as it appeared. I returned to the window, scanning the area, but he was gone. Days passed. I obsessy. Veli searched for any evidence. The parking lot, the street, the cameras. I checked everything. Walked across the street in daylight, looking for cigarette butts, trash, anything that might confirm what I'd witnessed. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The photo remains with me, grainy, dark, barely legible. Most people dismiss it as a coat rack or shadow, but I know what I saw. I know what was there that night. I apologize, but it seems like no text was actually included in your message. Could you please provide the original script or paragraph that you would like me to rewrite? Once you share the text, I'll be happy to help you restructure it while maintaining its original meaning.